Okay. And in case I forget at the end, I don't know if we'd like to continue Swadhyaya, maybe January, February next year. I was planning to just do Bhagavatam. There's intense philosophical sections in the Bhagavatam. I don't think it's just all stories of Krishna. The stories of Krishna are the 10th book. The first 9 books are kind of prepare the reader to sort of put some samskaras in place so that when we see little Krishna crawling around in the dust of Braj, and we're told that that's God Almighty on high, how on earth do you make sense of that? Well, the first 9 chapters sort of help us put the adhikar, put the bits and pieces in place that it will make perfect sense that a loving God has to hide his majesty in order to engage in love. So that was the plan. But then I thought, you know what? Well, I had a few requests, which I'm not sure. I don't want to do just. I'm not interested. I'm sort of losing interest in intellectuality just because stage of life. 66 now, and time to, vanaprastha. Should have started at 50 15 years ago, where you kind of withdraw. For a scholar, I think that could mean, sort of withdraw from just intellectual things. The thing about Indian philosophy, none of it's it's not intellectuality for the sake of intellectuality. It's all plugged into moksha and bhakti, as we'll see now. That's what we're going to see now. Nyaya is going to say, look, all of this right reasoning, we're not just armchair philosophers sitting with a glass of port and a cigar in Victorian England and just sort of speculating about thought experiments. It's all aimed to moksha. It's all right thinking is inextricably connected to the quest for truth. Nyaya is going to say. But anyway, to finish up what I was saying, so I haven't had a lot of response about the Bhagavatam. A few of you showed some enthusiasm, but I didn't get that many emails. So maybe that's, I don't know. I mean, I will do it, even if I just do it for myself, because it's bhakti. The Bhagavatam is Bhagavan. It's a literary.
Edwin,
there's different kinds of incarnations. There's different kinds of avatars. And the Bhagavatam is considered to be, can you hear?
Yeah, I can hear. I can hear.
The Bhagavatam is considered to be Murti Avatara. It's considered to be Shastra Avatara. So there's Murti Avatara, the divine descent into the deity. Then there's the actual divine descent, the Avatara, like Krishna and Rama. But there's also Shastra Avatara. So the Bhagavatam is considered to be a literary manifestation, not a representation. It's not the word speaking about something. It's like Om. Om is Brahman. So the Bhagavatam is Krishna. And the text guarantees, it says, if you read this from beginning to end, you will attain bhakti. That's its commitment. That's what it says. That's what it's marketing, not in a negative sense. It's presenting itself as a method, as a complete package that if we read the entire Bhagavatam, by the time we get to the end, we will have, or certainly by the time we get to the end of the 10th book, we will have love of God in the heart, and those samskaras will remain forever. Even if you don't finish this life, next life will be automatically attracted. Little kids will be automatically attracted to Krishna, and will insist on that our parents read us Krishna stories, and then our parents will start freaking out, and then we'll shave our heads and move into a ashram and our poor parents. No, anyway, okay. So Bhagavatam. So, but I'm beginning to think, why don't we do quick workshops and finish up the sutras? Do the 6 schools of philosophy. We've done 4 of them. So what if we did, I don't know how interesting the Mimamsas are, but look, Look here. Look here. Bhagavad Gita, right? You've all read the Bhagavad Gita. Also, look at the Bhagavad Gita. Chapter 2. Chapter 2, right at the beginning. Krishna says, look, the ignorant ones proclaim the flowery discourse, Arjuna, delighting in the letter of the Veda and saying there is nothing else. Who's he talking about? Vedic ritualists. Who are they? Mimamsas. They're doing Vedic ritual and saying, oh, you have to do the Vedic rituals. They say there's nothing else. Na anyad astiti. Look, full of desires, the Vedic ritualists, intent on heaven, not Christian heaven, svarga. They offer rebirth as the fruit of action and are addicted to many specific rites aimed at the goal of enjoyment and power. So Vedic ritualism is all about do rituals, and they're materialists. They believe in an Atman, but they only believe in an Atman because because if you do Vedic rituals, the next life you get a better material situation. You'll go to Svarga, a heavenly realm, not liberation. They don't even accept liberation. So they're a school, one of the 6 schools, and they have their sutra, Mimamsa Sutra, and they're quite interested, and they're brilliant philosophers. Don't think they're fools. The Gita's critiquing them. To those, the ignorant ones, meaning ignorant of moksha and liberation, attached to enjoyment and power. So the Mimamsas are trying to enjoy matter through Vedic ritualism, and trying to manipulate matter through the ancient fire sacrificial cult with all its mantras. So they're addicted to enjoyment of power, whose thought is stolen away by this kind of talk. Oh, if you do this ritual, you get a child. If you do this other ritual, you'll get this, you get that. So, you probably just skimmed over these verses, reading the Gita, but that's actually not a rejection of Vedic ritualism, but a kind of minimization. So we could do, but they're also powerful philosophers, and they have powerful arguments for the Atman. Now, their motive in arguing for the Atman is not the same as Yoga and Vedanta, who want to liberate the Atman. No, the Mimamsas don't want to liberate it, but they want to go to another realm. Well, something has to go to another realm. Something has to go from this realm to their celestial realm, material celestial realm. So therefore, they argue for an Atman, but they argue well. And they also debate. They also reject the Buddhists' momentariness, like Nyaya did. And then they don't accept Ishvara. So it might be nice to read some arguments against Ishvara. We read the arguments last week in Nyaya in support of Ishvara. So I was thinking, well, what do we do a workshop in Mimamsa Sutra? The problem, and then there's the Visheshika Sutra would be round up to 6 schools. Visheshika essentially becomes Nyaya. They become inseparable. At the early period, they're 2 distinct schools. Nyaya is more about logic, and Visheshika is more about metaphysics, and they just merge. Certainly by the 16th century, and even well before that. I don't know how the problem is I don't know if there's any user-friendly texts. I think we could stumble along with some Mimamsa Sutra and do okay, but I'm not aware of I keep getting this message here. I'm not aware of any user-friendly Vaisheshika text, and I've looked a little bit. Anyway, so that's an option, that we do 2 more workshops. I don't know how long they would be. They would need to be, I can't imagine Vaisheshika would need to be more than 3 sessions, but by Mimamsa might be a bit more interesting. A lot of Mimamsa is defending the Vedic ritual. A lot of it's about which ritual, why, systematizing the ritualistic portion of the Vedas. Remember, Vedanta is systematizing the Upanishadic. If you remember Vedanta, ding, 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 ding. Well, Mimamsas are also scripturalists, exegetes, but they're interested in the earlier parts of the Vedas. They're interested in the ritualistic portion. Okay. Anyway, so that's one option, that we finish up these 2 in the next year. So we do one sutra. Then we do one sutra. One workshop on Mimamsa, and then one on Vaisheshika. Then you have all 6 schools of Indian philosophy up there on the website, accessible for all time, or at least until I get in trouble with Rutgers, and then Bhagavatam. But I don't know. The other option is just do Bhagavatam. But make some noise if you want to continue Spadhyaya, you know. Otherwise, I'll just sort of think, well, yeah, why am I bothering? And just kind of just merge into my own Spadhyaya. Okay. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Homeritam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminite Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharine Nirvishesha Shunyavani Pashatya Deshatarine Akanda Mandala Karam Yenavyaptam Characharam Tatpadam Darshitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurange Radhe Radhe Vrindavan Ishvari. Did you get that? Well, you didn't get Tapta Kanchana Gaurange, it doesn't matter. She's golden. Tapta Kanchana Gaurange. Gaura Angi. Her Angis, like Ashtanga, her Angis, which really means limb, are Gaura, golden. Krishna Shama, black. Krishna means black also. Radha's golden. So make quite a beautiful color, color couple. Tapta Kanchana Gaurange Radhe. Now, this is the bit. Vrindavan Ishvari. Who's the Ishvara here? You think it's Krishna? This is Krishna's land. So where Krishna spent his pastimes. No. Vrindavan Ishvari. Radha is. That's why we say Jai Radhe here. We don't say Jai Sri Krishna. We don't say Hare Krishna. We say Jai Sri Radhe. And Radha is the queen. And the locals say she controls who comes to Vrindavan and who doesn't. You might try to cut the locals believe you can't just buy a ticket to Vrindavan. You have to, Radharani has to allow one to come. So we may think we make our plans to come to Vrindavan, but they may or may not come to fruition. So Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe, it's Gaurange because it's evocative. Like Radha Radhe. Tapta Kanchana Gaur. No, it's not. Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hare Priye. Apavitra Pavitrova Sarvavastha Gatopiva Ya Smaret Pundarika Ksham Sa Bhayapyantara Shuchi. The monkeys finally got my last two pair of glasses, so I got an unbreakable pair because they grab them and they sit up on the ledge, right, waiting for their biscuits. All right, throw up the biscuits, but then while they're waiting, they bend them. These you can bend any which way, and they won't snap. So these are monkey resistant. You get them in Loy Bazaar. Okay, let's kick off. What are we kicking off with? Oh, now. Right. The right and the good. Sounds like Plato, doesn't it? Right. What is the good? Okay, the last line here, the attainment of the supreme good. This is the very first verse of the Nyaya Sutra. So this, Matthew Dusty has arranged this schematically according to his, he's arranged it, Ishvara, Atman, etc. But actually, in the actual Nyaya Sutra, you'll see 111. Right. Knowledge sources. What are the sources of knowledge? Objects of knowledge. Well, what are the objects of knowledge? Doubt. Is there an Atman? Isn't there? Motive. Example. Right. Wherever there is smoke, there is fire, as in a kitchen. That's the example. So these are some of these in this list here are members of the syllogism. So in Indian inferences, you have an example. So if you say wherever there is smoke, there is fire, then you give an example, as in a kitchen. Of course, we're talking about, hopefully there's not smoke in a modern kitchen, but there would be in a village kitchen, right? So using cow dung. So knowledge sources, accepted position, you should know that now. Siddhanta, inferential components, right? There is fire on the mountain. There is fire on the mountain. Number one. Number two. So that's the sadhya, the thing to be proved. Then the reason, because there is smoke. That's the second member. We didn't actually lay it out formally, but this is a formal layout. There is fire on the mountain because there is smoke. Number two. Wherever there is smoke, there is fire. Number three. As in a mountain, as in a kitchen. And then if you want, you give a negative example. Unlike on a lake. On a lake, you're not going to have either smoke or fire. Therefore, there is fire on the mountain. So those five members are known as the inferential components. We didn't lay them out. It doesn't matter. But just so just so you know. Suppositional reasoning. What is suppositional? We covered that in that chapter on, I don't know, knowledge sources. So we say, okay, let us suppose there is reincarnation. And then you say, under that supposition, because remember, materialists don't accept it. But let's say you say, okay, let's suppose there is reincarnation. Under that supposition, is it more coherent to say an eternal Atman reincarnates or a momentary flow of consciousness reincarnates, obviously with the Buddhist in mind? So once you've established a suppositional statement that the Buddhists will also accept, let us accept, right? We're not going to argue that. We might have to if the materialists get involved, but you say to the Buddhists, let's suppose there is reincarnation. Now, under that supposition, which here are the two points of view, that there is an eternal Atman that reincarnates or a momentary one. Which one then stands, which one of those two positions can explain that supposition? And then we went through the arguments. If it's momentary, then the moment the person doing the deed is not the one getting the action in the next moment. So therefore, we looked at those arguments. So that's suppositional reasoning. Certainty. So certainty is when you have knowledge. You know, the pramanas are working correctly. Your senses are working correctly. There's a real tree in the yard, and you're getting your knowledge episode in the mind is accurately reflects a real object out there. So you have an imprint of, or the fire. So that would be certainty. You know there's a fire. And there's three ways you can know it. Provided the pramanas are all working well. Your senses are working well, or wherever there is smoke, there is fire. Your inference holds true, and words are given by someone who has seen the fire and wants to communicate it. So that's certainty. Certainty comes from that. Debate for the truth. You debate, but not just debate for the sake of debate. This is called vada. We've run into the word vada. That's a debate for truth. And the person engaging is vadin. Disputation. Destructive debate is when you just try to, you're fed up with your opponent. You think this person's not worthy of proper debate, and then you just sort of tear them apart intellectually. So that's destructive. Destructive debate is not to establish a point of view. It's just to sort of just to kind of destroy the position of the opponent. It might have, Nyaya will say it might have value in certain circumstances. If the opponent is just being obnoxious and just argumentative and just egotistical, then there may not be any point using proper debate methods. Then you just tear them apart intellectually. So that's destructive debate. Pseudo provers that don't really prove what they claim that they're proving. I can't think of a good example. Let's not get tied up. Equivocation. Can't remember what that is. Is it this? Is it thou? How's that different from doubt? I'm sorry, it's not. I can't remember quite now what the Sanskrit term for that is. Misleading objections. Okay, so then there's an objection that, for example, you're arguing whether there's a creator, and you're saying, well, all products have producers. So creation is a product, meaning that things come or assemble together. It's an assemblage of things, so someone has to produce them. And then the opponent says, well, trees and mountains are assemblages, and so that's the objection. And they don't have a creator, and then, but that's a false objection, because the trees and mountains are part of creation. They're part of the thing that's being debated. So therefore, you can't bring them in as an objection, because they're part of the very thing you're talking about in terms of creation. That sort of thing clinches, meaning that something clinches a debate. So these, from knowledge of these, there is the attainment of the supreme good. Notice how for Nyaya, correct. I notice how many of these are all connected with proper thinking. And you only through proper thinking can you attain the supreme good. Let me give you an example, my friends. Let's say you say, oh, all of this Nyaya stuff, it's all cerebral, it's all chitta-vritti. I don't need to do all of that. I'm just going to sit and meditate. That's how I'm going to get to truth. Nyaya is going to say, hold it. What does that mean, you're going to sit and meditate? Oh, I'm going to do chitta-vritti nirodha. Okay. And why are you doing chitta-vritti nirodha? Oh, well, Patanjali says, tada drashtu sarupe vastanam. Patanjali says, if I do that, then the seer will abide in its own nature. What's Nyaya going to come in and say? Oh, yeah? How do you know there's a seer? In the first place, Mr. and Mrs. Meditator, you want to throw out correct reasoning and say, oh, that's all, that's all intellectual stuff. That's too cerebral for me. I'm going to sit and meditate and realize my real self. Now it's going to say, how do you know there's a real self? Where'd you get that knowledge from? Where does that knowledge come from? Knowledge needs a pramana, a source of knowledge. It needs a knower. Remember, the source of knowledge and an object of knowledge, and then you get the knowledge itself. So you want to say the object of knowledge is the Atman. How do you know that? Where'd you get that from? You have to get it from a correct source of knowledge. Somebody told you, okay, well, that's a correct source of knowledge then. And Nyaya is going to say, don't think you can get away from correct reasoning. Even if you want to sit and meditate because your guru told you to, and oh, I follow my guru, well, then you've accepted knowledge through words, haven't you? You better at least be clear about what you're doing, how you're doing it, why you're doing it, and what your source of information is for doing it in the first place. So this is Nyaya's position. Okay, next one, 112. When pain, rebirth, activity, vice, and wrong understanding have been dispelled in reverse order, there is apavarga. So notice the second verse. Nyaya is agreeing with yoga. The goal is apavarga, which is a word for moksha. Remember apavarga, Patanjali uses it in the second chapter, apavarga, somewhere, right? So Nyaya doesn't, it completely plugged into the same goal. It's just saying, when you seek apavarga, at least be clear about what you're doing, how you're doing it, why you're doing it. There are options. There's Buddhists who say that there is no drashtu, there is no svarupa of the drashtu. Buddhists are going to immediately reject the third sutra of Patanjali. What do you get when you chitta-vritti nirodha? Drashtu, svarupe. Buddhists are going to say there's no svarupa, there's only momentary rupas. There's no svar. So therefore you need to decide, which path you're going to take and what the ultimate goal is. Otherwise you're just, well, then you're not then you're just kind of like dogmatically stumbling about. But notice in the reverse order, what's the reverse order? Well, it starts with wrong understanding. What's that, my friends? Avidya. What does Patanjali say in the Kleshas? Avidya kshetram uttaresham. Avidya is the field of the others. Well, Nyaya is saying the same thing. You start off with avidya, reverse order, and then there is vice, a dharma. And then there is, activity. You try to fulfill your desires. And then as a result, you generate reaction and you get rebirth. So you have to dispel them in the reverse order, which means you have to get rid of avidya, wrong knowledge. And Nyaya is going to say, and we're going to give you the tools to understand what wrong knowledge is. We're going to give you the intellectual tools. So don't dismiss Nyaya as just sort of debaters or no. We cannot, my friends, we cannot get away from thinking about what it is we're doing. If you're going to do yoga and you don't want to think anymore, oh, and you're going to sit on your mat, you've still accepted that there is a seer. And Nyaya is going to say, how do you know that? Where does that knowledge, that knowledge that there is a seer, and if you chitta vritti narodaha, then that seer will swarupa vastanam, can be experienced in its own nature. Where does that knowledge come from? And so we can't get away from right knowledge. And we can't, and if we seek right knowledge, we can't get away from having a clear idea of what are the sources of right knowledge. And that's Nyaya's contribution. Is that okay? Right, let's read Vatsyayana. Now he's going to unpack these things. Wrong knowledge, right? Look, there's these 6 things, right? Pain, rebirth, activity, vice, and wrong understanding. Okay, so now we're going to go in the reverse order. So we start with wrong understanding. So whatever's in bold here in Vatsyayana's commentary is one of the words from the sutra. The sutra has these 5 things: pain, rebirth, activity, vice, and wrong understanding. When they've been dispelled in the reverse order, why does he put them in the reverse order? Well, because we understand that we are suffering. Remember, the first noble truth of Buddhism, sarvam dukkam, 2:15 Patanjali, vivekinaha, sarvam dukkam, the wise know everything is suffering. Gita, dukkha ashashvatam. This world is samsara is a place of suffering. Why? Because ashashvatam, we can't hang on to anything. We can't hang on to our Kodak moments. We can't hang on to our youth. We can't hang on to our good looks, if we ever had any in the first place, right? All the wrinkles are coming along, all wrinkles, teeth start falling out, gaps between the teeth. Food gets stuck between the teeth. Well, come on, the reality of the body, my friends. We try to hide it. So why does he put it in the reverse? Because we know pain. And okay, so let's see what he says. Wrong understanding. Right now he's going to give an example of what that is. This is the job of the commentator, is to unpack the sutra. What is wrong understanding? Among the items mentioned, right, the 5 on that list, 112, the wrong understanding occurs in many ways with respect to objects that range from self, Atman, to final beatitude, right? So there's many kinds of wrong understanding. From what is the actual self? Is it momentary? Is it eternal? What is final beatitude? Well, the Dvaita Vedanta is going to say it's one thing. Nyaya is going to say it's another thing. Nyaya, it's a state of non-consciousness. Advaita Vedanta says it's a state of infinite Satchidananda bliss. But Nyaya is not. It's going to say it's kind of like a deep content sleep, where the qualities of the Atman, including consciousness, are latent. So there's so many different views, says Nyaya. So there is, first of all, the wrong understanding. There's no self. That's the materialist. So that's wrong understanding. And Nyaya's got, earlier on argued about it. Now it's not arguing. It's already done its work. In the previous chapters, it's done its work in establishing against materialists on the one hand, against Buddhists on the other hand, because those are the primary objectors. So that's the wrong understanding. There's no self, no Atman. Then thinking, this is pleasure, when something is rather a source of pain. So when we go out and we try to enjoy ourselves, then we have an ice cream and a pizza, well, we think that's pleasure. Now he says, well, actually it's pain. Why? Because sooner or later it's finished. And then, after the Kodak moment, or after we've had our dinner, then what? Then we're thrust into another state of unfulfillment. Then we have to do something else, and then something else, and then something else. And we think that's just normal life. Well, yogis say that's suffering. Okay? So that is, thinking that this is pleasure when something is rather a source of pain, that's wrong understanding. What else? Thinking this will last when something is impermanent. Oh, I'm entering into a relationship. Oh, it's all impermanent. Oh, I'm going to have children, they make me happy. Impermanent. So this is all wrong understanding. La. Come va? Okay. All right, what else is wrong understanding? This provides safety when something cannot do so. Oh, I've got lots of money in the bank. I'm all set for life. We think that provides safety when it cannot do so. Anything can happen. Anything could happen. It could be world banking crisis, anything. This is nothing to be afraid of when one should be afraid of it. These are all Vatsyayanas coming up with these sort of basic generic types of wrong understanding. This is acceptable when something should be rejected with disgust. And this should not be renounced when it should be. So other examples of wrong understanding include, right? So he's going on with this list of, all of this is avidya, by the way. Wrong understanding is avidya. So he's giving examples of avidya. What? Karma is not caused by one's actions. If you think, oh no, I can act, I'm not going to, it's not going to generate any reaction, that's wrong understanding. And there are no karmic consequences. I don't believe in karma, wrong understanding. Okay, next on the list, vice. Okay, it's in bold. So remember, this whole commentaries are unpacking the sutras, each sutra, and the commentator unpacks each word that needs unpacking. What's vice? Let's see what he considers vice. Vice is, oh, sorry, no, he's not. Yeah, this is wrong understanding still. Vice is, there is no rebirth, whether for the creature or the individual soul or some pure being or for a self, such that one having died would again come to be after death. That's the materialist. There's no rebirth, whether you believe in a soul, whatever you people believe in, or whether it's some essence or whatever. There's no rebirth. Wrong understanding. Rebirth is uncaused. Wrong understanding. To say that, oh, I was born, in this family, and someone's born in that family, and there's no cause. It's just happened that way. That's wrong understanding. Okay, so we're continuing with the list of wrong understanding. Cessation of rebirth is uncaused. Like, cessation of rebirth means liberation. There's no cause for that. You just die and go to heaven. Like some people will say, oh, everybody goes to heaven. There's no cause. So all of these for Nyaya are wrong understanding. Rebirth has a beginning, but it has no end. Yeah, okay, we're eternally cycling in samsara. There's no end. There are theologians that say that. Some theologians say that certain souls are nitya buddha, are eternally trapped in samsara. By their very nature, there are certain kind of damned souls that were always, and funnily enough, great theologians like Madhva and Vallabha, even here in Vrindavan, there are Vallabha traditions here. They wear red tilak. You see my tilak is gray. The Vallabha lineage, 16th century lineage, they wear red. And I don't know if any of you knew Shamdas, but he was a Vallabhi in the West. That lineage says there are nitya samsarins. There are those who are eternally just by destined to always circulate in samsara. They are ineligible for liberation. It sounds pretty awful. It's Calvinistic, actually. I don't know if you know Calvin, but he also in the West accept that there's certain souls that are damned, basically. In fact, there is this whole Max Weber, I think it was, argued that the rise of capitalism came from Calvinist Protestantism, because one of the signs in Calvin's thought, those who were not damned, but actually had God's grace, was material prosperity, which created a huge impetus on people to become materially prosperous. And Max Weber wrote a famous article. It's called something, Protestantism and the Rise of Capitalism. He claimed that capitalism came out of that spirit. In the old traditional way, you didn't accumulate, you just worked, and once you made the money you needed, in the old European, rural economy, you just worked and you were satisfied once you had what you needed. And this idea of profit for the sake of profit and never-ending profit, that's how Max Weber defined capitalism. It's a brilliant definition, my friends. Take a moment. I know I'm taking a detour. Ponder this. Can I just take a moment? What is the cause of, arguably, all of our environmental problems? Excess consumption. Excess consumption, which is producing all these byproducts. Plastics and destroying our environment, right? Where does excess consumption come from? Excess production. Where does excess production come from? Capitalist philosophy. What is that capitalist philosophy? Well, Max Weber, the so-called father of sociology, said he gave this definition of capitalism, my friends. Write this down. I think it's brilliant. What is capitalism? Profit and the search for ever increasing profit. That's it. No morality, no end point, no grand finale. No, profit and the quest for ever increasing profit. You're never satisfied. Make $1 billion. Well, now let's make 2 billion, 3 billion. How do you do that? Production. What do you do with your products? You got to sell them. How do you sell them? You got to create markets, even when they weren't there before. So now you create markets. What do markets need? Consumption. So this there is a absolute sort of there is the connection between the philosophy, the mindset of a capitalist, which is profit, forever increasing profit, and the need for never-ending consumption. If you're going to always make profit, then you have to have never-ending consumption. And then what? And then you just have all of the side effects of never-ending consumption. Depletion of resources, destruction of habitat, destruction of native traditions and cultures. I just wanted to throw that out there and ponder it, my friends. I think that's our greatest enemy. Is capitalism defined in that way? No moral codes, nothing adjudicating it, nothing monitoring it other than state laws. Profit and the quest for ever increasing profit. What does Krishna say in the Gita? Kama Esha, Krodha Esha. What is your enemy? Arjuna is on the battlefield. Kama, lust. Kama Esha, Krodha Esha becomes frustration when it's not fulfilled. Kama Esha, Krodha Esha, Rajaguna Samudbhavaha. It comes from the Rajaguna. Vidhihienam Vairinim. That's your enemy, Arjuna. Not those soldiers over there. Your enemy is Kama Esha, is Kama. Kama is a stronger word than Raga. Is lust. Perfectly maps onto to Weber's definition of capitalism. What is profit and the quest for ever increasing profit other than lust? You can plug it into the 7 deadly sins, whatever you want. Think about it, my friends. And let's get back to Nyaya. All right, so he goes on. Okay, I think we can skip this because I don't want to take another period here. So he goes through all these items on the list. Let's say what might be of interesting. So those are all wrong views. All right, let's go over here. Beset by such vices. Okay, what are the vices? Dishonesty, asatyam, jealousy. I mean, these are common things. You don't need Nyaya to tell us this. We could get this from any moral code system in the world. Dishonesty, jealousy, resentment, and pride. And what do they come from? Raga dvesha, attraction and repulsion. The more raga, the more desirous we are, the more there will be pressure on us to be dishonest in order to fulfill that desire. The stronger the desires, my friend, the more the more pressure is put on us or a society or a group of people. The stronger the desires are, the more pressure there's going to be to fulfill those desires, the more pressure there's going to be to compromise morality. Think about it. If you really, and think about your own life, if you're really clinging onto something, there's probably all of us have some memories of desires that we had that cause us to act in immoral ways that we now perhaps regret and are, and sort of feel terrible about. But it's desire. And what does Krishna says? Desire morphs into anger, morphs into tamas. And when it becomes tamas, that's when it becomes a dharmic, insensitive to others, and so forth. So keep all that in mind. So these are basic little things, but they're always nice to read, to confront them again. Right. What are the vices? Where were we? So, beset by vices, one sets out to do bodily acts of violence, theft, and illicit sex, right? Because of our desires we become promiscuous, where we take from other people, you know, maybe even just Western consumer culture, as even that is sort of theft on a sort of on a national level, depleting third world countries, that sort of thing, you know, creating horrific work standards in other countries in order to indulge our own consumption. Well, why isn't that theft? Okay, violence, you know, aggression against others. I mean, you think it through. These have, you know, in a personal level, but they also have national kind of variance. All right. Through speech, one engages in lying, vulgarity, and incoherence. With one's mind, one indulges in treachery, desire to have another's wealth, and refusing to accept what is true. Okay, these are all the vices. So this is sinful act. So the vices result in sinful activity, right? Directed towards a dharma. So we break the codes of dharma. The stronger our ragas are, the stronger our desires are, which are rooted in misunderstanding. Why? Right? Because desires are desires for the body mind, but we're not body mind. So that's avidya. So when we're in a place of avidya, we think we're body mind. We try to find happiness through body mind. That's desire. We have experiences that are pleasant, and they were recorded in the memory. This is a standard yoga sutra. They become desires. The stronger they are, the more pressure there is to fulfill them. And the more pressure there is to fulfill them, the more likelihood of veering towards adharma. So people that are very adharmic, according to this, are people that have the strongest desires. Okay. Now, there's good acts as well, says Vatsyayana. There are bodily acts of charity, protection, and service with the body. Right? When we do philanthropy, that's aimed at the body. You know, the great souls, they might do philanthropy, but for them, the real philanthropy is to free people from birth and death. Because you do philanthropy, it helps somebody, you know, for a period, a day or a period, or you uplift people, and that's very good. But it doesn't solve the ultimate problem, that ultimately everybody dies and gets reincarnated and have to suffer again in another life. So that's why the great sages, perhaps they engage in acts of philanthropy, but you think of Jesus or the Buddha or the great Indian sages, they tend to be speakers of truth. And their philanthropy is to guide people on the path of Dharma and ultimately on the path of moksha. That's the only way to be free of suffering. If philanthropy means to provide people the resources and the means to stop suffering, right? So we try to provide medicine and food and shelter, right? So these are methods to try to minimize the suffering of beings. What's the only ultimate way of removing suffering at all? Well, we know from the yoga point of view, it's to be free of the body, because as long as we have a body that's suffering, we can minimize it. But then we come back next life, and who knows in what condition, and the whole thing. So that's why great sages tend to be teachers. They tend to be teaching the Moksha Shastra, or even the Dharma Shastras. Okay, if you do want to be in avidya, if you are going to be in ignorance, meaning you think your body, at least be dharmic. At least be dharmic so you don't make bad karma. You'll make karma, you make good, at least make good karma rather than bad karma. And then maybe next life with good karma, less pressure to struggle for existence, you'll devote more time to the only way of being free of suffering, which is moksha. This is the position of the Gita, of the Buddha, of Jesus Christ, one could argue. But let's move on. So what is activity? Activity is, from the point of view of Indian thinking, where you act, right? So, Indian thinking tends to be, it's this or that. Not that it's black and white like that, but the shades of gray, obviously, Indian thinkers are not simplistic, only black and white, but as you have to establish black and white in order to have the criteria for any particular shade of gray. So this particular shade of gray is two parts black, 1 part white. This other one is 5 parts white, 3 parts black. So those shades of gray are combinations of black and white. So let's understand what black and white is. So that's dharma and adharma. And then we fill in all the blanks in between. So what is activity? It's instigated by righteousness, dharma, and unrighteousness, adharma. What does Patanjali calls it? Punya, punya. In 215, thereabouts. What causes your jati your boga? Te klada paritapa punya punya hetutva. What your jati, your birth, your lifespan, your quality of life, what determines it? Punya punya hetutva. Read 215 thereabouts. So everybody accepts this in ancient India, including Buddhists and Jains. Well, not when I say everybody, all the moksha traditions. So this is okay. Here, these are what is really meant by the word activity. What is action? The word karma is action, but karma actually means either dharma or adharma. In the Gita, karma means dharma. Actually, Gita is going to say if you act, it's a priori dharma, and if it's adharma, Gita calls it vikarma, the opposite of karma. So karma yoga means you act, you do your dharma, but without attachment. So Krishna introduces a new element to make it yoga, to make karma into karma yoga. Well, something has to be added to karma to make it karma yoga. And what is it that's added to karma? And that is the detachment from fruits. Then karma, meaning dharma, becomes yoga. Okay. Right. So jump down here. Activity is understood here causes rebirths that are despicable, honorable, and in between. So your rebirth is either good or bad. Where Patanjali says, hlada paritapa, joyful or distressful. Same thing, my friends, right? And in between, I mean, Nyaya acknowledges it's not black and white, but in between means, but here are the two polarities. What is the rebirth? What is rebirth? What is rebirth? It's the arising of body, sense organs, knowledge, and consciousness in assembly. The Atman is thrust into a womb, and according to its karma, the blueprint of karma, it's thrust into a particular womb, dog womb, tree womb, bug womb, insect womb, right? And what happens there's an assembly of a body, sense organs, and knowledge, right? Knowledge means in the chitta, what samskaras are manifest in a particular birth. All the other previous births are covered by tamas, like all the dreams. You sleep, you wake up, they're there, but they're covered by tamas. So all pass, and only a certain, like the knowledge of a dog is a limited cluster of samskaras. The knowledge of a bug, of an amoeba, is a limited manifestation of whatever samskaras are appropriate for that particular birth, that required burning in that birth. Okay? So you get, what is this rebirth? It's the arising. You're put into, the subtle body goes into a womb, and around that womb, matter accumulates, right? Little bits of atoms accumulate, and they take the form of an assembly of what eventually becomes a body. What is a body? Nothing other than sense organs. And then knowledge, your chitta, even though that chitta, you could be an Einstein in your past life. Let's say Einstein, I don't mean this disrespectfully, but just to sort of give an example. Let's say he did lots of good stuff, but maybe he did a little something that he now requires to be a bug for 2 weeks. Then he gets squished and moves on to some higher form. So in that 2 weeks, all of his great grand theorizing, where is it? Nothing is created or destroyed. It's in his chitta. It's memory. So all those memories are in his subtle body. That same subtle body is going into the body. It's not a different subtle body. We keep the subtle body until we liberation. Subtle body is we're only freed from it once. Gross body, we're freed from it every birth. Subtle body, we're freed from it once. So therefore, Einstein's subtle body, now with all of his grand theories and all of his, spooky action at a distance and everything he did, it's all in his subtle body, but it doesn't disappear. Nothing disappears. Nothing is created. Things are not created from nothing, and they don't go back into nothing. Stuff is stuff. It just recycles. So therefore, Einstein's, all of the samskaras of him sit right here in Princeton, where I live, all of that is in his chitta, but covered by tamas. And now there's a little pocket of samskaras that need to manifest, and a bug body is the best body to accommodate them. So that little cluster of samskaras among the trillions and trillions and trillions, not just his life as Einstein, but all of his infinite lives before that, all of that suppressed by tamas. And that little pocket then manifests, and now he's a little bug. And then for whatever, that jati ayor, how long does he stay to be a bug? Ayor, that's your lifespan. Karma determines it. Once that pocket is it is burnt, it's been experienced, dead. The bug gets squished. So all of this, right, is so what is rebirth? The arising of body, sense organs, knowledge, and consciousness in assembly. When this occurs, there's pain and suffering. Everybody is pain and suffering, the threefold sufferings, my friends. Remember, this is all shared. The threefold sufferings that Patanjali talks about, what the commentators do. And why is everything dukkam? 2:15. Because there's suffering of the body mind, number one. Other living entities inflict suffering, number two. You're a bug. Other bugs, bigger bugs, try to eat you. Birds are always looking for a nice, tasty meal. And then the third type of suffering is the environment. Even if you're a bug or an ant, monsoons are probably not fun if you're living in an anthill. I'm sure they have their methods. They have their engineering that allows them to survive. I bet a lot of them get drowned. So these are the three types of suffering. Okay? So pain and suffering. So all of this is understood as what is disagreeable, including affliction, physical pain, and sorrow. All these features, right? Now going back to the sutras, Vatsyayana, beginning with wrong understanding. So he's going in the reverse. Remember, dispelled in reverse order, right? So wrong understanding is the fifth. So all these features, he's connecting back to the verse, evolve continuous, unbroken action within samsara, the cycle of birth and death. As long as we're under the kleshas, we cycle through samsara. In contrast to all of this, when wrong understanding is dispelled, right? Avidya is dispelled by vidya, viveka in Patanjali. Tadabhavat, avidya bhavat, hanam, tadrishahe hanam. Patanjali, when avidya is dispelled, ignorance is dispelled, then the samyoga, tadabhavat, samyoga bhavat, the coming together of the seer and the seen. Patanjali says, I don't know, 218 or somewhere around there. But later on, what's the cause of suffering? It's the samyoga, the coming together of the seer and the seen. And then he goes, tadabhavat, samyoga bhavat, hanam, tatrashahe kevalyam. When avidya is removed, the samyoga, the coming together, the glue, the glue that keeps the seer and the seen trapped together, that is removed. And that hanam, freedom, Patanjali says, tatrashahe kevalyam, that is the liberation of the seer. All right? Good to make these connections, my friends. Let's see if we can find it. Look, what's the connection? What causes samyoga? What's suffering? Here's suffering. Right? What is suffering? It is the samyoga, 217, the coming together of the seer and the seen. If that is the cause of suffering, that has to be removed. And then a bit later on, he says, the cause of samyoga is avidya. The cause of the coming together of the seer and the seen, which causes suffering, is ignorance. Look, here it is. Tadabhavat, when ignorance is removed, samyoga abhavo, the coming together is removed. Hanam, freedom. Tadrishahe kevalyam, that is the kevalya of the seer, the liberation of the seer. My friends, it's all overlapping. And there's disagreement between the schools, but mostly it's overlaps. Okay. So here it is. When wrong understanding is dispelled by knowledge about the self, how do you dispel it? Yoga Sutras. How do you get this? How do you remove it? Viveka kyatir, from viveka aviplava. Unbroken viveka. That's the means of liberation. Right? And where do you get viveka from? 228, Yog Anga Anushtanad, Ashudikshaye, Jnana Diptir, Viveka. How'd you get Viveka? From following the limbs of yoga, impurities are destroyed, and the light of knowledge. So Viveka gets rid of avidya, and that gets rid of suffering, my friends. But you should know this, because you're doing yoganga. Most of you. What was the purpose of the yogangas, like asana? To develop viveka, which removes avidya, which removes suffering. Nyaya is saying the same thing. Our logicians, friends, here. There we are. Back to Nyaya. Nyaya Sutras. In contrast to all this suffering and all this stuff up there, when wrong understanding is dispelled by knowledge about the self and the rest, right? Knowledge of the self. Not much bhakti here, even though we accept Ishvara. But bhakti is not stressed in Nyaya. It's knowledge of the self. Vice is dispelled by knowledge about the self. Vice is unsupported. Vice is supported by ignorance. Because I think I'm the body, that I try to enjoy the body, that I engage in vice to try to fulfill my illusory desires. And then I wonder why I'm always dissatisfied and never satisfied. So vice is unsupported. You take away avidya, there's no more support. That's why Patanjali says, avidya kshetra muttaresham. It's the support of the others. The support of the others, my friends. Come on, let's make these connections. Where does it say that? Here. Where? Somewhere. Oh, but let's go down to second chapter. Second chapter. Here we are. Second chapter. Where? Avidya, look. Avidya, there's the kleshas. Avidya kshetra muttaresham. 2-4. Avidya is the field, the support of the others. What field is a metaphor for the supports? The crops that grow, they grow out of a field. The field is the support. So Patanjali calls it a field. Nyaya calls it a support. But when you get rid of avidya, right, it's unsupported vice, and it goes away. Vice goes away, evaporates. The other kleshas evaporate. Vice now gone, the activity that it compels ceases. When there's no vice, then we don't do adharma anymore. We don't engage in destructive activity that harm others. With activity ceasing, rebirth ends. With rebirth left behind, pain departs. My friends, the only way to be free of suffering is not through tinkering about with your material situation. Money's not going to do it. Changing partners is not going to do it. Running around, like, it's not going to do it. Only moksha. And of course, for bhaktas are going to say, well, really, bhakti for Bhagavan. Right. Now, what is knowledge of the truth? That knowledge of the truth may be explained as understanding that is opposed to wrong understanding. Patanjali calls it viveka. And what is right understanding? First of all, there is a self, Atman. That's vidya. That's viveka. Then in this way, pain, the impermanent, which cannot offer protection, and the truly frightful are to be understood as things to be avoided. Once you understand your Atman, you want to avoid things that take you away from the Atman. Patanjali calls it klishta and aklishta vrittis. The aklishta vrittis. Gita says your mind is your friend or your enemy. These are all different ways of saying the same thing. Okay. One further understands when we are in knowledge. When one undertakes activity, there is karma in the sense of the results of action. That's knowledge. Everything I do is generating karma. If we know that, we'd start to think very carefully about what we're doing. This is all knowledge. There are vices. There are things that are adharma and that are going to create suffering for me in this life or a future life. There are vices. There are moral codes embedded in the universe. The universe has a dharma. There are certain things that are, and our planet now is suffering a dharma and all this environmental stuff. It's coming from overconsumption. And that's coming from raga, greed, the klesha. So therefore, there are consequences that are, some are immediate, some in next life. Patanjali says, drishta janma vedana. Some come in this life, some come in the next life. Our environmental issues are coming in this life. Rebirth is a reality. This is knowledge, whether it be of the, okay, blah, 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 blah. Right, or more knowledge. Rebirth, which has a cause, ceases. And that cessation has a cause. In other words, we can stop rebirth. And the cause of ceasing it is, there's a cause, the path of yoga, following the practices of yoga. That's the cause for ceasing rebirth, which is the cause for ceasing suffering. Okay, all of this, let's jump and let's go down here. In moksha, one at last finds spiritual peace. And now Nyaya now has its own idea of what moksha is. They don't talk about bliss. Vedanta does, Satchidananda. Disengagement from everything, cessation of everything is what Apavarga amounts to. For they don't even want to be conscious in liberation. Now here is where we part company with Nyaya. Here's where Vedanta, Sankhya, and of course Bhakti parts company with Nyaya. Nyaya would say that in liberation, all the qualities of the Atman go into latency. Remember the signs of the self: desire, aversion, happiness, distress, effort, and consciousness are qualities of the self. We discussed it in what is the inferential proof for the self? Why should we posit there's an Atman? What are the linga of the Atman? Remember, the Atman has qualities which cannot be pegged, lingas, those 6, which cannot be pegged to an atom of matter, any atom of matter or subatomic particle. We can't identify a subatomic particle of matter using modern physical terminology that exhibits sign of happiness, distress, desire, aversion, consciousness, and will. We haven't found a little revolving whatever muon or a gluon or a vibrating string or whatever physics end up with. We can't find anything in the domain of physics that has these 6 qualities. Now it's going to say perfectly simple. So therefore, these 6 qualities, if they cannot be located in any known material thing, but they exist, well, then they must be qualities of something else then that's not material. What's difficult about that? If you want to say consciousness is the epiphenomenon of matter, well, it's all very well saying that, but you're just proclaiming a dogma then, aren't you? You're no different from a religious person saying Jesus Christ is the only way. What good is that? So therefore, if you want to say consciousness is an epiphenomenon of matter, well, fine. What do you mean matter? Oh, you mean a neuron? What do you mean a neuron? Well, neuron's a bunch of subatomic particles zipping around in the configuration of a neuron. Well, find the subatomic particle that has these 6 qualities then. No, it's going to say, and we could quite happily follow in their footsteps on this one. You think my consciousness is material, find me a string or a muon or a gluon or a proton or whatever you come up with that has these 6 qualities. If you fail to do so, then you have no business challenging. Our position holds true. Remember Nyaya, our position is still standing. That these 6 qualities must be located, because we know they exist, because we know them because we ourselves have them. Don't need any scientist to tell us that there exists happiness, sukha, dukkha, raga, dvesha. We don't need any microscope or Hubble bubble to tell us that these 6 qualities are there, because we experience them. So therefore, if you cannot find a material substance of which they are the qualities, any material substance, call it what you want, string, right? Maybe in 10 years they'll say, oh, strings are really vibrational or something else, fine. Whatever it is, find it. Until you do, our position remains standing, and yours has failed. Yours has failed. You haven't found it, so it's failed. Well, maybe you say in the future you'll find it, fine. Until then, failed. Our position holds, it remains standing, that these qualities are qualities of some other kind of substance that's not material. That's our position, Nyaya would say. How is that not still relevant to our modern intellectual moment, my friends? Don't tell me Nyaya is not relevant. Change the language, obviously. We'd have to start talking about muons and gluons instead of anus. But the principle holds good, that these 6 things are inferential qualities of something other than matter. That's all. That's all they're saying. And they call it an Atman. Right. What intelligent person would not be pleased at the prospect of apavarga, is a term for moksha, right? Kevalya, right? Apavarga, Patanjali uses the term apavarga. Where does he use it? He uses it in 2 something. Well, okay, here, I think he uses it. Here, 218. Bhoga apavarga. See the apavarga here? It's stuck onto the term bhoga, but here you see apavarga. And then it has artam, but there's the apavarga in the middle there. Remember, Sanskrit words can get joined together. So we're making connections, my friends. I'm assuming that most of you are familiar with the Yoga Sutras. I want you to see how this is an entire intellecto-spiritual universe, a cluster of all of this. Some internal differences, no doubt, including what the nature of liberation is. But masses of shared material. And this is the intellectual stream within it. What intelligent person would not be pleased at the prospect of apavarga? What is it? For them, it's just a cessation of pain. Notice there's no talk of ananda. It's a cessation of pain. And no awareness of any pain at all, right? Vedanta is going to go on and on about bliss, 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 ananda, ananda, ananda. That's a Vedanta. Even Patanjali doesn't talk about Ananda. Where's Ananda? Not mentioned in the Yoga Sutras. That's Vedanta. Okay. Therefore, as food that is a mixture of honey and poison is not to be taken, what does that mean? Our experiences here, we seek happiness, but our bhoga is always mixed in with suffering. Our sukha, there's no pure sukha moment. There's no pure sukha moment. What's a pure sukha? Make up a story. Oh, you're going to go to a nice restaurant with your beloved and the full moon, and well, something's going to happen. Mosquitoes are going to come out, or you're in anxiety because maybe your beloved, she's writing emails to somebody else. Well, I go, what's all that about? I mean, there's going to be something, isn't there? There's going to be some poison in there. Something's going to happen. Something wrong with the food. There's no pure sukha. Where's the pure sukha? Tell me what. Go into your memory bank and tell me what pure sukha moment did you have? And even if you could find one, how long did it last? So it's always mixed. The honey mixed with poison, as Nyaya says it. Right? As food that is a mixture of, they're recognizing, yeah, we do have our little sukha episodes. There's a mixture of honey and poison. Don't take that. So pleasure that is shot through with pain. We seek raga, but inevitably, invariably, it's shot through with dukkha. Whatever, ask yourself, don't listen to Nyaya. Or any time you go out in the world to seek sukha, every single time it's going to be shot through, as they say, there's going to be dukkha there. Now, the proportionality may change, depending on your karma. There's no pure sukha. And yogis want pure sukha. For Nyaya, pure sukha, they don't say pure sukha. They say complete absence of dukkha. That's liberation. Vedanta is going to say, that's not very attractive. We want complete absence of dukkha, but ananda is a quality of the Atman. It's sat and it's chit and it's ananda. Now Vedanta says that. Don't project that onto everyone. Not everyone's going to accept that. Okay. Well, Nyaya doesn't accept it. Right, moving on. What else have we got? Moving on. So as karma causes the construction of a body, it is also responsible for a body's connection with the self. Now we move on to karma. What causes the body that we have? Karma. Okay, we basically know how it means, how it works. Let's see how Nyaya frames it. Without the causal influence of karma, every individual self would have a similar body. If there was no karma that distinguishes your body from mine, we'd all have the same karma. That's why they would never understand Christian idea of ex nihilo. Keep going back to ex nihilo, creation from nothing. Because if God was really fair, and he created from nothing, then we should all have the same body and then give him the same chance, and then you do Dharma or Dharma. But we should at least all start with the same. And if we don't start with the same, then what causes the differences? And for Nyaya, it's obviously everything is cause and effect. So the causes must have been in the past life. If you say, well, God did it, they're going to say, well, what kind of, in fact, this is exactly what when the pundits had to fight back against the missionaries who early missionaries. Well, you should read the way they were writing about Hinduism, disparaging, you're worshiping demons in the temple, your caste system is just an oppression of the poor, and on and on. And then the pundits are finally, their Dharma was to respond. It's the Dharma of a theologian. You've got to protect your tradition. What do you think Augustine, Aquinas, what do you think the early church fathers were doing? Christianity. The Greeks were sticking their nose up and saying, you simpleton, you Christians, you believe in some weird theory, some weird idea that God gets crucified, and then eventually your intellectuals have to come up and create a theology that's coherent. That's what the early church fathers did. So when the pundits started responding to the Christians, and they said, all right, you're going to attack us. Let's have a look at what you believe in then. What do you believe in? Let's have a little look at that then. And then one of the things they attacked was, well, you're God. You only believe in one life. And you say God creates everybody. Well, why doesn't he create them equally then? What kind of a God is that? Is he whimsical? He put somebody in the family of, of Al Capone. And the little kid has to shoot someone when he's 3 to give him his first blood. Remember The Godfather, first movie? And someone else is born in a family of some great saintly Christians. So they're not starting off in the same place to pursue Dharma and Adharma. They don't have the same initial starting point to decide whether they want to be moral or immoral. Well, why is that then? So they found that completely ridiculous, philosophically incoherent, and not a very good reflection on the Christian's notion of God. What kind of a God would then? What kind of a God is so unjust that he creates people and puts some in this awful kind of very immoral kind of beginning, immoral family. So sometimes it's good to look at your religion from the eyes of others. It's really good. I love, you should read that book. It's called Resistant Hinduism. Fantastic book about early pundits' response, in Sanskrit pundits. They're not schooled in Western thought. We're not talking about Vivekananda and those that were the Bengal intelligentsia that were actually educated in British educational colleges like Scottish Church College and, in Calcutta. No. We're talking about pundits. Didn't want nothing to do with the British. Stay away. Don't let them near my house. They're dirty. They eat meat. If they walk by our street, throw a bucket of water where they walked. Those kind of pundits. Eventually, they had to respond, as they did to the Buddhists 2,000 years earlier. So, what was their response? Say, all right, you're going to attack our religion. You say we are irrational and we believe in 16. Well, what do you believe in then? You believe God has to come down and get crucified? Ridiculous. When our God comes down, he kills all the demons, Krishna and Rama. Well, your God comes down, he can't even. If you want to free everybody, just do it then. Why'd you have to sacrifice? Why'd you have to get nailed on the cross? What ridiculous idea is that? Our God, when he comes down, he kills Ravana. Rama does. He might play around for a bit to have a bit of fun, and then nobody messes with Krishna. Krishna kills all the demons. All of the various avatars, they come and they kill the demons. There's a demon that's disrupting the planet. No one can oppose the demons. They become too powerful. All right, Vishnu comes down. He doesn't get strung up on a cross. He kills them and goes back. What kind of a wimpy God how ridiculous is that? And what's this original sin business? Somebody did something 2,000 years ago in some garden, an apple, and the whole human race is cursed forevermore. What kind of a God? What kind of a theory is that? Look at it from a point of view of a pundit. Someone had a nibble at an apple up there in some garden. They talk like this. They always say there's a garden up there somewhere, right? The same way as the missionaries are talking about their religion disparagingly and without really full knowledge of it. So they say, okay, let's have a look at yours then. Someone had a nibble at an apple, and what's this business about God pulling out a rib? Didn't he know that Adam might need a companion? Why do you have to pull out a rib from poor old Adam to make Eve? Why didn't you just make Eve in the first place? What, is he insufficient knowledge? How ridiculous is that story then? You think we got ridiculous stories? Have a look at yours. And then Eve has a nibble, and then the whole human race forever is damned to hell. And then you've got to come down and get crucified to save the human race. What kind of a religion believes in something absurd like that? Pundits. Resistant Hinduism. Have a read, my friends. Great read. Book called Resistant Hinduism. Right then. So karma, it causes the construction of the body, not God whimsically ex nihilo. So without the causal influence of the karma, why did we take that detour? Because if there wasn't karma, every individual self would be a similar body, unless you want to come up with this idea that God is completely whimsically partial, inexplicably put some people into a bad body and some into a good. We're not prepared to do that, I would say. Our understanding of God is he's benevolent and fair, and not like that. So therefore, how do you explain the dissimilarities in birth? Well, karma is the only explanation. Unless you want to talk about a incomprehensibly unjust, unfair, whimsical God. If that's the kind of God you want to worship, go ahead. And then don't wonder why no one's converting to Christianity then. Very few do. The Portuguese had some success, but the Protestants didn't. Very little. If you consider how South, a lot of Africa gets converted, lots of parts of the world, India didn't. There were few, somehow or other, for some reason, and I'm not sure why. I'd like to look into this. Why the Portuguese had success in the 16th century, such that half of Kerala is now, is still still a sizable Christian population in Kerala, but not so. Calcutta, I mean, there were few. But the missionaries are absolutely frustrated because they would have these incredible conversations with the Brahmins, profound philosophical exchanges, and the Brahmins would go, yes, Jesus, oh, very nice, very nice. They liked Jesus, actually. They thought he was a Mahapurush, the great saint. So they would agree with everything. They go away and no one was converting because Hinduism can absorb that. Oh, they would just say, well, Jesus is we have so many rishis, and yeah, you have one rishi. We have so many rishis. Well, why can't you have one? Yeah, we accept your one rishi, your one sadhu. But we're not going to. Why should we just accept one? You think God is only attained by one rishi? Well, that's another foolish idea you have. We have so many rishis. So, okay. Fox, his name is Fox, the author of that book. But having said all of that, let me just say this for those of you that are Christians. Very rarely did they say anything disrespectful about Jesus. They had nothing. They had to respond to missionaries. That was their dharma. The missionaries were coming, attacking them insultingly. So they had to respond. And all of the Christian theology, accumulated over the centuries. But the Jesus of Nazareth in the New Testament, namaha. They did their namaha. He said, in fact, Raja Ram Mohan Roy, it was the father of, he was the first kind of Hindu apologist. He wrote a whole book on Jesus of Nazareth. And said, you Christians have got it all wrong with your, only through Jesus and your Trinity and all of this. And he completely and utterly deconstructed later Christian theology. It's simply based on the Jesus of the New Testament, which he accepted. So those of you that are Christians, you might be interested to hear that. For the most part, very, very few Dayananda did attack Jesus. There was Dayananda, the Arya Samaj. For the most part, they never had anything bad to say. On the contrary, they respected and they could recognize Jesus as a rishi, as a Mahapurush, as a great saint. But all the rest of it, don't come attacking us. Have a little look at what you believe in before you start calling us irrational. Okay, so karma. If you didn't have karma, everybody would have a similar body. What would be the mechanism that would distinguish different births? What would cause? Everything has to have a cause. What is the cause for one person being born in a good family and one in a bad? If you don't have karma, what explanation do you have? Right? They rejected the idea of just atoms as assembling. That makes no sense at all. We don't see that in any sphere of known knowledge. Okay. So what we find, however, is that each specific body is arranged in connection with an individual self, right? The body sort of conglomerates around the self. The karma that causes the making of a body is also responsible for a body's being connected with an individual self. So the self makes karma, and the body then, according to the karma then creates the blueprint, and then the body accumulates around that Atman. Obviously in the womb, it's some kind of a womb. For karma fructifies as restricted to a specific self. Your karma is specific to you, my karma is specific to me. So our different situations, the bodies, our karma, our access to resources, where we live, all of that is soul specific. So the abode, the self is the abode of karma. The self makes karma and receives it, and it's specific to it. And by the way, this is another idea why they reject Advaita Vedanta. The idea that there's only one cosmic soul and that all souls merge into it. They say, of course not. Each soul, and Sankhya says this right at the beginning of the Sankhya Karikas, each soul, if there was just one universal soul, then how does it fracture into infinite souls? And right? So therefore, the fact that there are an infinity of souls means that they're all individual and they're all creating their own karma. And when they each individually attain liberation, they don't merge into something else. They now remain in their own nature, but a liberated state. Don't project Advaita Vedanta onto Hinduism. You've heard me say it a million times, but I'm giving additional reasons. And here's a Nyaya argument. Karma is soul specific. Why there's no universal. We were eternally in samsara, and when the individual becomes liberated, the individual becomes liberated. If there's only ever one soul in the first place, how did it get fractured? And if there was only one soul, then when anyone attains it, everybody would be liberated. There's lots of arguments. I don't have time to get into that. But Ramanuja, read the Ramanuja's rebuttal of Advaita Vedanta. It takes up 1/5 of his Vedanta Sutra commentary. All arguments rebutting Advaita Vedanta. So, again, you should be aware, Advaita Vedanta is one expression of Vedanta, but not the only one. Okay. So, for karma fructifies as restricted to a specific self, which is its abode. The rule is, what's the rule? According to the self, what is the rule of karma? The rule is, they like to say this, the rule is, like even in pujas and where I live in the ashram, the pujari there, very conservative Brahmin, does his been, so he's always doing niyam, the niyam, ito niyam, ye niyam, he's a great guy. So we joke around, and I say, I pick a flower for Radharani, and I bring it to the temple, and I say, Babaji, ye to Radharani de sakte, ab to de sakte, koi niyam hai, koi ab ne de sakte. I say, is there any rule that you can't give it to Radharani? He goes, niyam. He's not allowed to take it from me because it's touched my hand. So he goes, but he's laughing, he's smiling. He goes, niyam hai. So rules, there's always these rules. Sometimes they get a little overwhelming. But anyway, here we are. So the rule is, what's the rule? According to the self that houses certain karma, right? According to the one Atman, a body is produced that will serve as the seat of the experience that is specifically the self. We act. And the soul is the actor in Nyaya, much stronger than Sankhya. Sankhya has a problem with this. Nyaya is the soul that's acting, and then the action generates a reaction because the cause and effect is the universal law of everything in the universe. So the reaction comes back to that seat. That's why they don't like Buddhism. Buddhism's idea of momentariness. because the soul acts, the reactions comes back to some other moment later, completely different. So karma is responsible for such an arrangement overall, meaning your body. And then, the extension of the body means your social situation, economic situation, and access to resources. In this way, it is declared in the sutra. What is it? Now he goes back to the sutra. As karma causes the construction of a body, it is also responsible for a body's connection with the self. Okay? So karma causes a self to be associated with the body, and the body to be associated with the self. The body is the fulfilling of the blueprint of karma. We understand by the word connection. Well, yeah, what does this connection mean? The overall arrangement such that a specific body is related to a specific self. I get my body, you get yours. So my karma is connected to me, it's not connected to you. Right then, let's move on. What else are we going to do here? Accordingly, lack of universality among beings is explained. Why don't we all have the same body? That's lack of universality. Nothing's universal. We all have our distinct karma. Question, Vatsyayana. Now, you know the question is going to be the Purva-paksha, opposing point of view. What, first of all, is meant by universality in the sutra? Right? The sutra says lack of universality. Question, what is this? No, it's not a Purva-paksha, it's just a question. Answer, if a single individual self had such a body, then every other self would have the same. That would be universality. So if there's no causes explaining differences, if there's no causes creating differences, we'd all have the same body. So lack of universality amounts to one self being one way and another self being another. We're not universal, we have different bodies. Such distinctiveness is exclusionary, right? What's distinctive to me is exclusive to me, not you don't have it, you have some other set of factors. And it is a matter of common experience that there are distinctions of life. We don't need to argue for the differences. I look at you and I know your karma is different from me. You got money in your pocket, I don't. You're handsome, I'm not. Blah, 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 blah. Right? It's a matter of common experience. I don't have to argue for that. One is of noble descent, another is ignoble. One is glorified, another's criticized. Right? Why is it famous? One suffers, one malady after another. Another is never ill, right? It's a matter of common experience. Do we really have to lay this out? One is all limbs intact, another is maimed. One is afflicted by recurring pain, another is all the time happy. One is endowed with excellent traits of character, another the opposite. Blah, blah, blah. One is praised, And there are subtler differences, immeasurably many. Immeasurable. Do we really need to list them? This is what we mean by distinctions of life. And why they become possible, what makes them possible, what underpins them? Differences of karma, governed by the laws of gravity, electromagnetism. These are, what is a law? We don't know what a law is. We call them laws of nature. They just are. What is a force? It really is something that makes something else moves. Gravity makes things move in a certain way. Electromagnetism, there's different kind of motion. And depending on the force means that you force something else to do something. But why? What are the forces? Nobody knows. They're just things that are. And what we can measure and judge is what they do. So we can measure the force. But we don't know what a force is. It's something that does something. Think about it. Think it through. Your philosophy of science. We can tend to think of science as this sort of, unquestionable wall of absolute veracity. But actually, it's based on these foundational assumptions. There are forces. And if something's forcing something to do something, well, it has to be other things that it's doing it to. So there have to be substances. It has to be some kind of material substance, whether it's Newton thought it was an atom, and then now we got a proton, and now we got muons, now maybe we've got strings, but there has to be things that forces move in the most simplistic of terms, right? From a philosophical point of view, what is Aristotle about? What's the motion? What causes the motions of the heavens? And ultimately ended up with a prime mover, but he's thinking of it in terms of movement. Well, we call it force or movement. What difference does it make? Philosophy is never redundant, my friends. What philosophy does is get beyond these assumptions. He says, let's look at it. What is a force? Movement. And something is being, if there's movement, it's something's being moved. So there must be a substance then. That's philosophy. Philosophy of science is much more interesting than science. Is boring. Science is just, okay, let's measure it. All right, let me take measure. All right, 5 feet. All right. The philosopher says, well, what is it? What is a force? Sorry, I'm being obnoxious. I offer my namaha to all the great scientists that are making our life. I'm being silly. Okay, right. The distinctions of life, right? All right. They become possible through differences of karma governed by laws that tie to individual self. And that's one reason for Ishvara. Something has to be making sure that an effect comes to the right Atman. That's one reason there has to be an overseer of the law. The law, karma is an inanimate force like gravity and everything else. So that too needs an overseer. If there wasn't the karma, they would all be alike. The elements of earth, right, the material, earth, water, air, fire, would produce the same body for itself. If there was no law saying, no, this one gets this body, that one gets that body, if there was no distinguishing entity that causes distinctions governed by a law, a principle, right? Gravity always does, it always works in the same way, whatever gravity is, mass minus whatever the formulas are, it's consistent. So the law of karma has to be consistent. And since all beings have different bodies, there has to be a consistent law explaining why different entities get different bodies. So therefore, what's he saying? Where is he? If there wasn't that, all would be alike. The elements of the earth and the rest would produce the same body for itself. If there was no force moving them in different directions, this one gets a dog body, that one gets a human body. If there wasn't a force doing that, they'd all be the same. For they lack a causal reason to generate diversity in themselves. The atoms don't have a reason because they're inert, they're achit. They do not have chit. That's what matter is, achit, right? Atman is sat, chit, ananda. Matter is achit. Sankarikas, it's the opposite. So if it's achit, it's not conscious. If it's not conscious, it's not intelligent. If it's not intelligent, it doesn't self-direct. And the atoms assemble into a particular body. That makes no, what makes them do that? If you're going to say there's no force, but the atoms themselves, well, what is the principle within an atom that makes a bunch of atoms conglomerate into an assembly we call dog body, and another bunch of atoms conglomerate into an assembly we call human body? What is the mechanism underpinning those differences? And Nyaya is going to say it's incomprehensible to say the atoms are doing it, because the atoms are the same in the body of a dog or the body of a human. The same earth, water, they would say earth, water, whatever we would say, right? Helium, hydrogen, or whatever equivalent. Don't get distracted by the fact that they're using earth, water, air, fire, substance. Obviously, their knowledge of chemistry, they didn't have microscopes. But the principle underpinning it holds good to this day, my friends. The basic, these kinds of principles, that there must be laws, are still a challenge to any form of materialism. So this is the difficulty of a materialistic position. They can't explain why atoms conglomerate into one body and a different body for someone else. That's their difficulty. Well, the karma theory doesn't have that difficulty. So remember the principle of Nyaya, it remains standing. And the opponent's view doesn't have an explanation. Therefore, it can be rejected. Life as we know it wouldn't occur if there wasn't karma. You wouldn't be able to explain variegatedness. Therefore, the making of a body is not without karma as a causal influence. In other words, it is with its causal influence is karma. Okay, knock down any opposing point of view. And in our days, they would ridicule our materialistic science. Cannot explain causation of different bodies, among so many other things. But here they're talking about karma. Now, the next commentator, Ujotkara, remember there's 2 or 3. So this one up here was Vatsyayana. Now Ujotkara. What then is this universality? What does that mean? In the universality is in the sutra, right? Anything in bold in the sutra. Where's the sutra? Accordingly, lack of universality among beings is explained. The fact that there isn't universality requires that there's a reason for lack of universality. We're not all the same. What's the reason? Karma. You don't want karma? What's your opinion? Well, then what's your alternative theory then? God? God just does it? Ex nihilo? Throw that out. God's not whimsical, cruel, and just, you know, not that would be thrown out instantly. So that's not an alternative. Another alternative, atoms self-assemble. We don't see atoms self-assemble into coherent units such as bodies. Throw it out. So what's left standing then? Karma theory. This is the Nyaya method. Remember Tarka, get rid of the opposing points of view, and is the last man standing. Udyadkara adds, what then is this universality? It's explained as what would it obtain if a single self having a body meant that every cell would have the same body. If it was universal, we don't have the same body. He's just saying the same thing. Lack of universality is explained as one self being one way, another self another way. We all have different karmas. That the difference is exclusionary. Your set of factors are exclusive to you, your karmic factors, and mine are exclusive to me. Is a matter of common experience. He's repeating here. Living things have bodily differences that are multitudinous. It's a matter of common. Just look, your body's different from mine. Male, female, I wear spectacles, you don't. Living things have bodily different, all right. And this would not be the order of things. You can't explain the nature of things if material elements worked alone. If you just say it's just atoms and there's no guiding force, well, what would make atoms conglomerate in the specific ways they do in your body and in my body? So you couldn't explain it independently of the influence of karma. When bodies are produced, but it is in the order of things, we would call nature, that bodies are different according to differences in karma. Okay, let's move on. We got a lot of ground to cover. Right, what do we want to do here? And it is possible that a self can be separated from the body, right? In other words, the proponent may say, okay, but the soul is trapped in the body and that's it. It's going to always be trapped. No, it's possible because it is possible that karmic influence to be exhausted. So if you accept that karma causes the assembly of the body, then no karma, no body. Going back to Patanjali, avidya, tad abhavat, samyoga bhava, when ignorance is removed, the connection with the body is removed. So if you accept the law of karma causes a body, and then you want to be free of the body, well, you have a method. Stop karma then. And then we have the various, processes of doing that, karma yoga, bhakti yoga, so forth. A body is produced from two natures, one visible, the other invisible. Of the two, the invisible is karma. You don't see, it's invisible. In fact, one of the names of karma is adrishta, the unseen one. It cannot be seen. So that's the invisible. And the visible is the bodies in our, we'd see the bodies. It can be completely exhausted, karma can. Through the experience it generates. You can burn up your karma. And when karma is completely exhausted, then although there are in place all the necessary material elements, they don't produce the body. So if we stop making karma, then we stop making bodies. Because bodies are nothing other than the physicalization of the blueprint of karma. Thus, it is possible that there be apavarga, moksha. He's translated it as final beatitude, right? Liberation. So karma theory allows for liberation. But if you don't accept karma, if the material elements worked alone without karma, independently of the influence of karma, then how could it be those? Then how would you explain? You wouldn't have liberation because those material elements are not working under any force or logic or system or method. They just self-assembly. So they'll always self-assembly. You'd never be free of it. It's only when there is a force called karma, which has a cause-effect logic to it, that you can stop the cause and then stop the effect. You can stop making karma and stop the effect. But if you take away the law of karma, you just say, well, it's the nature of atoms to produce bodies, then that would always be their nature, and you'd never be able to be free of it. That's what he's saying. If the material elements that worked alone, independently of the influence of karma, then how could it be that those being liberated would ever find final beatitude by means of a complete exhaustion of what binds them? They'd never get liberation because the atoms would always just self-assembly. There'd no way of being free from them. They wouldn't have any cause. You couldn't get rid of the cause to stop the effect. So therefore, atoms, you'd always be in an atomic body or a material body. Why? Because there's no interruption of the causal power of the material elements. If you take away karma and you say that the material elements are the causal power, well, they would always be the causal power. There's no other mechanism guiding them. So it would just be their nature of the atoms to produce bodies. You could never break out of it because that's their nature. Everybody doing okay, my friends? All right, back we go. Now, karmic results mentioned do not occur for everyone because it's impossible. Let's skip this. It's all about Varnashram. I want to make sure we finish the bit about yoga. We'll come back to this because it's already 7:11. You talk about the different scriptures. You might be interested. Different scriptures. What is their value? Remember, the scriptures are the third way of getting knowledge, words from reliable authorities. The rishis or Ishvara. Why are they reliable? Two conditions: they must have experienced the truth, and they must have a desire to communicate it. So scriptures are considered to be, mundane. In the mundane, that would be your lawyers, accountants. They know the law, they know your taxes, they know doctors, your health, and they want to help. But that's mundane words. But each of the three knowledge systems has a lower, a kind of conventional, material and a spiritual. The spiritual words are who are the authors of them, the sages, the yogis, and Ishvara, who have seen the truth. Remember, that's a requirement. And number two, desire to communicate. So let's go on from that. Okay, where are we going? So I'm going to see how many. This is my friend Lakshman.
Hey. I only see myself then.
Yeah, well, they'll see you. Lakshman and I were monks together. We were sadhus in 78. We wandered around India in saffron, shaved head, barefoot, right? Sometimes, Lakshman, yeah. We would barefoot. Back in those days, Indians had never even met a Westerner. And can you imagine a Westerner that was a sadhu? We had some amazing experience. We were talking about it the other day. We had so many amazing, for years we did this, so many amazing experiences. When something is amazing, like every day, it ceases to be amazing, becomes normative. And I sometimes find it hard to go back. I mean, we met the kings of everything from the king of Udaipur down to, we had access, all doors were open to us by being Western sadhus, back then anyway. And we we used to sit on top of buses, and we had no money. We were sadhus. We would sit on the funky old Indian buses with some things that we were carrying around. We would sleep in these old dharmsalas, old temples. Everybody would just be so happy to have us stay. We had, I can't even remember, Lakshman, all of the adventures that we had. Yeah. But anyway, but now here we are in with a sort of nice, comfortable house in Vrindavan. C'est la vie. Right, let's get back to this. Okay. Now we connect all this to yoga. Remember, Nyaya is completely and utterly, they consider the goal of everything they're doing. Everything they're doing is contributing to the goal of yoga. They do not question that. They are in no way saying, it's not like Nyaya is an alternative to yoga. Absolutely not. Nyaya sees itself as presenting us tools, fine-tune our thinking, fine-tune our understanding of why are we suffering? Why does Patanjali say we're suffering? What does that mean? What is the goal of yoga? Why, how do I know there's a self that is Svarupa Vastanam? It's giving us tools to think clearly and carefully about what Patanjali is just assuming. He's assuming you've done all that work. And so we can just start off and saying, well, yogas chitta vritti nirodha, and tada drashtu sarupe vastanam. He's not arguing for the existence of the self. He's assuming it's there. He's just assuming. If you do chitta vritti nirodha, then drashtu svarupe, then you have an avastanam experience of the drashtu svarupe in its own nature. Why is he not arguing for it? Well, because Nyaya's done all that. See? So it's not that they're two different things. You do your Nyaya, you study your Vedanta, so you learn about the Atman from Vedanta, but some people might be thinking, well, okay, just because the Upanishads say it, why do I know that? That's true. What if it's just a bunch of old white men? Except it would be old brown men, right? Like what are the WASPs? White Anglo-Saxon Protestants. Well, the equivalent of the WASPs in ancient India would be brown Brahmins. If we have white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, then the equivalent of that, white Anglo-Saxon Protestants who decide what Christianity really is, the equivalent to that would be, brown Brahmins. So you could say, well, why should I believe? So we have the wasps and the bees, the bees, right? So why should we believe wasps and bees? So fine, Upanishads. How do I know? How do I know? So then Nyaya says, okay, if you need a little bit more than that, here we'll give you inferential reasoning, and we'll give you tools that are in your control. Not that the scriptures are outside of your control; they come down to you. If Patanjali will give you the experience, but you got to sit on the mat for 50 years before you Svarupa Vastanam. Well, what's going to sustain you during that 50 years when your mind says, hang on a minute, where's this Atman they keep talking about? I've been sitting here for 45 years. I haven't had a Svarupa experience. All of a sudden you're besieged by doubts. Then what? So then Nyaya says, okay, look, we'll give you intellectual tools that will fortify what the Vedantins, the Upanishads are saying, and will support what the yogis that have finished the yoga path report back to us. We'll give you tools, intellectual tools that will sustain you on that journey. Okay, so but now let's see that it's here. For the purpose of attaining Apavarga, remember Apavarga, here it is, Apavarga, well, we already looked at it. It's another term for liberation. So we got moksha, we got mukti, we got nirvana, we got Kaivalya, and we got Apavarga, and probably loads more. But those are 5 fairly common terms. Okay, again, moksha, that's a bit later. I don't think moksha is in the Upanishads. It's a later term. Mukti, moksha, mukti. Nirvana's old. Gita has nirvana 3 times. Don't think it was Buddhist. Became Buddhist later. Once it became Buddhist, Hindus stopped using it. But in the early period, everybody used it. So we got Mukti, Moksha, Nirvana, Kaivalya, and Apavarga. Patanjali uses Kaivalya and Apavarga from that list. Gita uses, it doesn't say moksha, it says moksha yisyati. In a verbal form. You will attain moksha becomes as a verb, becomes moksha yisyati. So it's used in a verbal form, moksha in the Gita, but nirvana is used 3 times. And the Gita has other words, right? All the same. Devo andare? Arriva la signora? But I'll stay till she comes. Yeah, when she comes, I'll go up. Okay. Nice cup of chai. Lakshman makes better chai than I do. He puts more sugar in. Cardamom. I'm going to put cardamom and ginger. In this part of India, chai, that's it. Different parts put different things, and by the time you get to the west, you got anise and star anise and God knows what else. But UP, ginger and cardamom. Okay. Mary, were you there at the beginning of class? We were talking about Mimamsa, Vivaisheshika. Mary says, we should finish. I said, no, I'm not. She says, you always say that. She might be right. She might be right. Okay. Mary's my good friend. You coming to Vrindavan, Mary? Don't forget the Parmesan. Okay. Anybody coming to Vrindavan? Parmigiano Reggiano. Please, Lakshman, Italian. You don't get it here. They do have a awful mozzarella, Amul cheese, but you know, you're desperate. But Parmigiano, no. If anyone comes to visit the Goshala, make sure you bring some Reggiano, and then we will be very grateful. Okay. For the purpose of attaining apavarga, there should be self-purification. Okay, now all of that, this is at the end. Look, end 4246. The end of the Nyaya Sutra, all that work it did, what a knowledge source is, and we skipped tons of it. What is the real? What is the relationship with language, word and object? Loads of stuff. We only hit on, what do? We did knowledge sources, we did Atman, we did Ishvara, we did doubt and the philosophical method, and now the good. That's a fraction of Nyaya. All of that. Now, all of that production of intellectual work for Nyaya, what's the goal of it all? At the end, what does it say? What's the purpose of all that? It's not intellectuality for the sake of intellectuality. It's plugged into the same project. For the purpose of attaining apavarga, there should be, and remember the beginning? Removal of pain, which is apavarga. It's just another way of saying apavarga. Look, how did it start? Look, how does it start and how did it end? This is how you tell what a text is about. Opening statements and closing statements. So what's the opening statement? How do we get rid of this thing? Okay, look, 112, second verse. When pain, rebirth, activity, vice, and wrong understanding have been dispelled in reverse order, there is apavarga. The goal is the same. Apavarga, all of that production of knowledge is plugged into the same project. Vedanta, Yoga, Sankhya, Apavarga. Nyaya is just making its own unique contribution to what we need to get to that Apavarga. And we need right thinking, clear thinking. And now it's going to conclude, the end. When you write a paper in school, what do you do when you write a paper? Right? But B, what do you do? When did you do when you were a student? Did you have to write a good conclusion? I mean, a good introduction? It's, really kind of like honing in on what you're doing. And then what? You do all your stuff, all your hard work. And at the end, what do you do? Conclusion, you say, well, what was all that about? And then you say what it's all about. That's what Nyaya is doing. What's it about? Apavarga, second verse. Now, last verse. What's it really all about? Apavarga. So don't think Nyaya are just sort of, just kind of engaging in intellectuality. The Greeks prided themselves. They thought that was a good thing. They said, well, these Indians, we admire their intellectuality, but they start off with the premise that there is an Atman. So that's not real intellectuality, the Greeks say. We don't start off with any premise. We just let, we just let logic take us where it's going to take us. So they faulted the Indians for that, while they had great admiration for them in other ways. And the Hindus would say, well, you're just going to buddhi vritti forever then. What's the point of that? Well, our sort of intellectual engagement is with the goal of complete freedom of suffering. And that can only be attained. So they do start off with that, yes. Our whole intellectual enterprise is to stop suffering. And actually, some Greeks would agree with that, maybe even Plato, that's the purpose. Okay, for the purpose of attaining apavarga, there should be self-purification by means of yamas, niyamas, and by psychological instructions and methods taught in yoga. So Nyaya, at the end of it all, then hands the ball over to yoga. So again, we did our work. We tried to show you that reason supports the existence of an Atman, and knocks down. It's the only coherent understanding of consciousness that left standing. We've knocked down all the alternative views, materialist, the momentariness of Buddhism, and the issue, we've knocked it all down. We cleared the ground. We've established there's an Atman. We've established the laws of karma. We've established reincarnation, not just because it's written in the Veda. We've established it by reason. We did all the work. We did the intellectual work. Now, over to Patanjali, if you want to attain it. So they're recognizing that logic and inferences are not going to give you liberation. You got to do yoga for that. But they want us, my friends, to embark on our path of yoga with clear, rational understanding of what we're doing and why we're doing it. That's their contribution. Then they hand us over to Patanjali. Clear, rational, able to respond to anybody else that tries to undermine what we're doing and our philosophical underpinnings of what we're doing. Nyaya gives us the tools, defend ourselves against materialists, momentariness believers, and so forth. All of that cleared. Remember, Tarka, clear the ground, clear the last man standing. There is an Atman. It's trapped in karma. It's suffering. The only way to be free of suffering, yoga. Now we've done all the work. Okay, over to Patanjali. Namaha. And they understand that they cannot. Theirs is not a method of liberation. They're just providing the intellectual tools, and then they say, okay, now you did all that. Okay, now you go sit over under that tree over there. There's a guy called Patanjali. He'll take you to the next. He'll take you to the where he'll actually give you that experience, which we have established as real, as true, using reason and argument. But if you want to attain it, over there, over that tree or the other side of the forest, go to the Patanjali yogi sitting over there. So, for the purpose of attaining Apavarga, yamas, niyamas, and the methods taught in yoga. Vatsayana, for the purpose of attaining Apavarga, right? Final beatitude, self-purification. We got to, ashuddhikshaye, right? Klesha tanukarana. What does Patanjali say? Right? You want to get, he puts it two different ways. In 228, he calls it, right? He calls it ashuddhikshaye. Here, yoganganushthanat. When you do yoga, what are you doing? Ashuddhikshaye. You're removing the impurities. So that's purification then. What's purification? Removing the impurities. So that's why you do the 8 limbs. Ashuddhikshaye. Then jnana deepti. Then the light of yoga, which will give you viveka, the knowledge to remove avidya, which is the field of all the other kleshas. So that's 228. Ashuddhikshaye. Underline it. That means purification. And what about 2.2? What about 2.2? If you do this kriya yoga, right? This kriya yoga, what then what? Klesha tanukarana. You weaken the kleshas. Well, that's another way of referring to purification then. Because the kleshas are impurities. They're obstacles. So this is all, Nyaya is saying the same thing. So self-purification is done by means of the yamas and niyamas. Again, we do the yamas and niyamas one more time. Why do we do the yamas and niyamas? Ashuddhikshaye. I don't care if it's repetitive. We got to really strengthen these samskaras. Why are we doing the yogana anushtana? Why are we doing the anushtana of yoga? Why? From doing that, this is ablative case. From ablative. Okay, I have to go upstairs because the lady comes to clean. Like I said, it's many years since we were sadhus wandering around there. But Lakshman as a cleaning lady, which is really nice because it helps the poor lady make some money. And 65, I think, probably. If you're going to have a little help with cleaning, it's probably a good time. Right then. Okay. So Nyaya Sutras, Dusty. Here we are. The restraints are virtuous equally for those of different stations of life. Nothing to do with caste system. Yoga has nothing to do with the Varna ashram. In the Varna ashram system, if you're a brahmachari, you do certain things. The grihastha, different things. Householder, different rules. Vanaprastha, different rules. Sannyas, different rules. Okay, and if you're and if you're professionally a Sudra, different rules, different Dharma sutras for you. And if you're a businessman, different Dharma sutra chapter for you. If you're a warrior, different Dharma sutra, you're allowed to engage in violence, for example, if you're a warrior, but nobody else is. Different rules, Brahmana, different rules. But yoga, the constraints are virtuous equally for those of different stations of life, for your Varna ashram. That's the yamas. But the observance is interesting. He says the niyamas, in contrast, vary with life circumstances. That's interesting, but Patanjali would not say that. He would say that the rules, let's have a look what he says. See, you know what happens when we read a text like that? It makes us go back to the Yoga Sutras with a different lens. Look at this. Look at here. Right? He discusses the 5 yamas. Then he says, here, he says the same thing. Look. He says the yamas are the great vow and they're universal and there are no exceptions based on your caste, jati. Do you see? He doesn't say that about the niyamas. I hadn't noticed that before. Look, after discussing the yamas, here are the yamas, 229, yama, right? Right? What are the yamas? Ahimsa, satya. We all know that one, don't we? Yeah, we memorized that for our teacher training. Right, we got it written up on our studio wall. Well, we should know it. Ahimsa, Satya, Asteya, Brahmachari, Aparigraha. They are, Aparigraha. Aparigraha, the long A is because it's plural. Yamaha, those are the yamas. Now notice, the yamas are the great vow. Sarvabhauma, universal. Universal. What did Nyaya just say? We'll go back and look at it again. Universal. They are not, no exceptions to them according to caste, jati, country or time. And then he talks about the niyama, but notice the niyama, it doesn't come under the Mahabharatam. I never noticed that. And now you see how Nyaya helps us revisit Patanjali with a new way of thinking. I spent 25 years with Patanjali. Do you know how long it took me to write that commentary? And now it's a bit out there. Everybody wants me to lecture on it. So many yoga studios invite me, and still, and I'm getting, all the time you're getting new insight, and I never noticed this. Look, for the purpose of it, he spells out what Patanjali doesn't spell out. Why does he say yamas are the great vow, not the niyamas? Well, Nyaya has a little something to say. So for the purpose of the restraints are virtuous, right? Yamas and niyamas. The yamas are virtuous equally for those of different stations of life. Jati. The jati we just read. The observance is in contrast. So he's spelling out what Patanjali is implying that I didn't notice. The niyamas, in contrast, vary with life circumstances. So what that seems to suggest, if we take that seriously, is that the niyamas of Ishvara Pranidhana and Svadhyaya and Tapaha are not for everybody in all stages of life. I don't know what that implies, so we have to think about it. He doesn't say when do they apply or not, but notice the overlap between those two ways of thinking of yama and niyama. It turns out that Nyaya is mapping onto Patanjali very precisely. And anyway, in all cases, self-purification removes unrighteousness and increases virtue. So removes a dharma, dharma. Psychological instructions are to be studied according to the Yoga Shastra. So the Yoga Shastra tells us how to control the mind, all that good stuff. What do they include? Tapas, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, and dhyana. So that's all comes under psychological instructions because they're all dealing with the mind, right? If you do tapas, you have to control your mind. Your mind, control desires. That's mental. Breath control, again, the mind is controlling the prana. Pratyahara, again, the mind is in control of the prati, kri. And dharana, obviously, in dhyana, mental. And the practice of pratyahara is for the purpose of removing attraction and aversion. the raga dveshas. So when we do pratyahara, we're internalizing consciousness, so it's no longer out there, subject to raga dvesha, raga dvesha. When consciousness goes out through the senses, it contacts the sense objects, and that contact generates like, dislike, dislike. Okay, so that's it, my friends. It turns, Nyaya is acknowledging last sutra of the first and the last sutra, that let's just quickly, how much time do we have? A little bit. Okay, we'll do a little bit more. We'll just focus on the yoga bit, and then that'll be it. So now we got a different commentator, Vatsyayana. According to context, the words "for the purpose of attaining Apavarga" should be carried over from the previous sutra. Don't worry about that. That's just a technical, syntactical thing. The word science, right? Shastra means a body of Sanskrit learning, and which Muni translates as science, Matthew Dusty. In the sutra means knowledge of the self. So Shastra, the ultimate goal of intellectuality, of the body of Sanskrit learning, is ultimately liberation, is what Nyaya is saying. When first knowledge of the self, you have to know the self, and then know why is it suffering, and then know the conditions of suffering, then understand karma, understand reincarnation. It all starts with an understanding of suffering. That's the spiritual journey begins there. If there wasn't suffering, why would you look for a way out? You'd be quite happy. You'd be skipping through the roses. And, like what's her name? In Sound of Music, what's her name? Mary Poppins, what was her name? Right, you'll be, the fields are alive, right? You'll be just
Julie Andrews.
Yeah,
Julie Andrews.
You'll be skipping through, just singing if there was no dukkham. So it's because of dukkham that what's the first karika of Sankhya? It's because of suffering there arises desire to know why. Does everybody know which? This is a question from Rubin. She wants to know which sutra mentions Julie Andrews. I don't know, Rubin. We'll have to look for it. Julie Andrews and the Nyaya Sutras. Okay, quickly. All right, what is science? What is this word shastra? Right, shastra is shastra means to teach. Shastra is the instrument of teaching, so it's the text themselves. They would have been oral because now they're written. So your Yoga Sutra book is a shastra. Your Bhagavad Gita as a book is a shastra. It's a shastra is to teach. My guru is Haridas Shastri, is the teacher. Shastra is that which is taught. So the word shastra in the sutra means knowledge of the self. That is to say, the science concerning the self. Sva dhyaya. Sva is the self. Study of it consists of learning and memorization. You have to memorize it. You've got to internalize the teachings. If you just read it and forget it, well, what good is that? That's why repetition is fundamental to svadhyaya, as it is in your asana. The word repeated in the sutra means that one should engage continually actions of learning, listening, and reflection. This is Vedanta, right? And look at the footnote. The Brihadaranyaka, old Upanishad says the self is to be learned. How do you learn about the self? This is the third way of knowing. You hear about it, then reflect upon it. That's Nyaya. So look at it. There's two sources of knowledge. First, it starts with hearing about it. Before you apply Nyaya, you've got to first hear about it. Then you go to Nyaya and says, well, I heard about it. Can you give me some, additional logical reasons why I should believe what I heard? But it starts with hearing. Whether it's from your guru, whether it's from the Upanishads, you hear about the Atman. Think about, how did you first come in contact with yoga, my friends? Back in the 60s, Marcia, counterculture. How do you first hear somebody said something? You met a guru, you met some hippie smoking pot under a tree, you picked up a book from East West bookstore, words came into your chitta. Whether you read them, whether you heard them, words came in from the outside. That's how it starts. And they somehow twigged for you. They somehow were strong enough to make you, keep reading or keep hearing. Then you apply logic. Then Nyaya says, okay, some people are happy with that. Fine, go do Patanjali. But Nyaya is going to say, well, not everyone's going to be happy with that. Well, we'll give you some extra tools. That's Nyaya. So, right. Repeated, because think about it. If you've been unlimited lives in samsara, boga, 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 raga, 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 your entire chitta is pervaded with nothing other than raga dveshas, some of them latent from past lives, and then you hear your first word, that's going to be one itsy titsy little samskara in a sea of kleshas. So you got to strengthen it. How do you strengthen it? Repeat it, svadhyaya, 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 svadhyaya. Otherwise, it's going to stand a chance. It's always going to be there. It will resurface. It's different from the other samskaras, but svadhyaya is repetition. So we read every day, my friends. You gotta have a serious svadhyaya practice. My guru was very emphatic about this. The sacred texts are the truth, they're the verbal manifestation, and we have to put it into our mind. What does it mean to have a wise mind? It's not something people are born with miraculous. It just means that their minds have been transformed into knowledge-bearing minds. Well, what is a knowledge-bearing mind? It's a mind that bears knowledge. Well, how's it bearing knowledge? Because knowledge got into it, and now it's bearing it. Well, how did it get into it then? It has to come into the mind. It's no magic. Well, how does it get into the mind? Through the ears, the teachings, through the eyes for us, since the printing press. And it comes in through the eyes and ears and into the mind. And now the mind is knowledge-bearing. And the more you do that, the more the mind completely change into a Bhoga-raga sort of mind, looking at the world, always thinking raga-dvesha, raga-dvesha, everything's raga-dvesha, raga-dvesha, raga. What am I going to get out of this? What do I avoid here? What do I gain here? What do I gain here? What do I avoid? Raga-dvesha, raga-dvesha, and then sukha, dukkha, sukha. Oh, I did well here. Sukha, sukha, sukha. Oh, that didn't work out so well. Dukkha, dukkha, dukkha. Right? So we either wander around the unit, life after life, sukha, dukkha, raga-dvesha, or we transform that. Well, it's not going to transform by magic. So we got to get other kinds of samskaras in there. And how do you do that? Shastra, the yoga teachings. Fortunately, we have access to books. But back then, they were wandering sadhus, and if you're interested, you tagged along. And you find your teacher, and then you walk around India with him. And you're listening. Listen. Okay? And then the more of those samskaras go in, the more the mind becomes full of those, and the other ones get pushed into latency. All the past life, all the raga-dvesha ones. And slowly you accumulate the wisdom samskaras until eventually your mind becomes wise. Well, what does it mean? It means that what wisdom samskaras are in the mind. That's all it means. But they have to get in there. And svadhyaya is an extraordinarily powerful way of doing that. That's all. So, back to this. So repeated, the word repeated in the Shastra means that one should engage continually. It never ends. That's the path of Jnana Yoga. If you're a bhakta, it never ends. You're always thinking of your beloved Ishvara, always, not just for half an hour when you do puja. Constant, because otherwise what? What does Patanjali say about abhyasa? Dirgha kala, Nerantarya, no interruption. What does that mean? Constantly. They're all saying the same thing. Because if it's not constant, what happens? It's like your garden. The minute you go away for 2 weeks, what happens? All the weeds come up. I'm going back to England now. God knows what I'm going to find. All lovely, all nicely, everything nice when I left. But it's all lying dormant. Our ragas, we could be doing amazing svadhyaya, tapas. Well, this life. Well, what about the infinity of lives then? The minute we stop, up it all rises, all the old samskaras. Why do you think all the gurus have scandals? All the big this, that, and the other scandal. Because they relinquish their practices. They think they become big gurus. They're surrounded by adoring disciples. Oh, Guruji, it's all got to go to your head, isn't it? You start believing their own story. Oh, now I'm enlightened. And then what? Stop doing your sadhana. Then what? Well, pretty soon you'll be on all over the internet with some scandal, won't you? So it's repetitive. And you know that from asana. You don't do asana for 2 weeks, Mary, right? even Mary, your body's you'll know about it. Right then. So repeated in the sutra means that one should engage continually in actions of learning, listening, reflection, right? So learning, you hear the truths, you listen, but you reflect on them. This is not anti-intellectual. And this part of the reflection is where Nyaya is going to say, we can help with that one. You hear, go to Vedanta. You listen, go Vedanta. Now you've done that, you've got the samskaras. Okay, you've heard about the Atman. Now we reflect. We'll give you methods of reflection. We'll show you why belief in an Atman is more coherent than not believing in one, or believing in the wrong sort of Atman. That is a reflection, and that's Nyaya's contribution. It gives you the tools to reflect on what you've heard. They're all directed to the purpose of bringing that wisdom to maturation. Such maturation, in turn, destroys doubt. At a certain point, it all becomes obvious. Alternative views are just ridiculous, and now you're mature. Right? Destroys doubt, making one know things not known previously, as well as giving one full command of things understood. You become in command. You can then teach. You become in command of the knowledge. You're then capable of teaching and explaining in a coherent way why this is so, and why that alternative doesn't hold muster, is inadequate, materialism, etc. Okay, so that comes from Svadhyaya. All right, the word discussion means conversational debate. What's the point of conversation? Aimed at consensus. Not just arguing, but let's get to the truth. Bring in your Purva-paksha by all means. Bring in rival views by all means. Teachers should never, you've seen how intellectually rich this is. If you say this, we say that. If this objection is raised, all the way through our study in Nyaya, we've been engaging objections. So they must be brought in. And that's why I keep bringing in Big Bang and all of this stuff, because those are our objections in our day and age. You've got to deal with them. Consciousness is a neuron. These are our objectors. So if you're going to teach, you have to deal with that. There's no, Buddhists, well, there are Buddhists. All right, take that back. But I mean, our main objection, our main Purva-paksha is going to be materialistic science. Okay. The one who knows the science of the self. Remember, what is the criteria for teaching? What makes your words reliable? The third source of knowledge, words. You have to know the subject, number one, and number two, be willing to teach it. The one who knows the science of the self should be admitted into the discussion, along with pupils, teachers, right? And of course, well, what if you don't know? What if you haven't experienced it? I haven't experienced the Atman. So that probably makes me, I'm not a qualified teacher in that level. But as I like to say, a blind uncle is better than no uncle. Who said that? I think no, that's the Indian tradition. They say a blind uncle is better than no uncle. Till you get an uncle, at least you might, at least hang out with a blind one, because he'll still buy you an ice cream. He's still an uncle. Okay, so alternatively, maybe there's an alternative here. Let's read that again. The one who knows, right? That's the criteria of verbal authority. You have to know it yourself. If you just believe it, then you believe there's fire in the mountain, and you go and tell someone else, and he says, how do you know? You say, well, I don't know, I heard it. So then you could say, well, how do you know? At some point you got to go down. Well, I heard it from this one. At some point you got, there's a stop sign. Somebody saw it. Otherwise, that knowledge of the fire is not based on anything. So the one who knows the science of the self should be admitted into the discussion, along with pupils, teachers, and colleagues, those well-wishers who are distinguished by their seeking the supreme good. So I think we'd be allowed into that company, my friends, because we may not have seen it, but we're pupils. I consider myself a student, a pupil, and number one, so that gives us, we're allowed into that assembly of truth seekers, and we're well-wishers, and we're distinguished by seeking the supreme good. Maybe we can lay claim to that. maybe we can say, well, yeah, I'd like to feel that about myself, that I'm seeking the supreme good. Vatsyayana, just reading the words of the sutra is sufficient to correct the correct sense. You don't need any explanation. I think that's what he's saying. He's saying, I don't have to say anything about it. Just read the words. What's difficult about it? And if one should worry about the banding about of thesis and counter-thesis would be offensive to one's interlocutor, oh, this is important. And he says, look, if you think raising questions to your teacher is offensive, read the next sutra. Alternatively, people who have no counter-thesis of their own are also to be admitted to further the purpose of the discussion if they seek the truth and the supreme good. They should be, well, it doesn't quite fit. But anyway, they never hesitate to ask questions to a teacher. If there's ever like a community of seekers and they create this atmosphere like, oh no, can't ask that. Bogus. There should be no question. I mean, obviously it has to be appropriate. You don't ask your guru, some mundane, how to file your taxes. I mean, not that kind of question, but any question related to truth, never sort of, if there's ever this sort of atmosphere like, oh no, don't ask that. Bogus. Just do namaha, go away, go find another sangha. There should be no only read these books, don't read that book. Only what my guru says no, or somebody else says no. That's not healthy. It should always be thesis, counter-thesis, purvapakshas. There should be healthy intellect. Nothing should be out of bounds in the honest pursuit of knowledge. The minute you start putting strictures in, then you become a cult. That's the distinction between a cult. One of the distinctions of a cult. Cult starts to control access to knowledge. You read this, don't read that. That's cult. A real seeker of truth is you read anything you want. Bring in any, as long as it's appropriate, like appropriate in the sense that as long as it's a question about truth, not about, how to wash your clothes, then there should be no restrictions. Okay, be clear about that. If you ever run into communities where certain things are taboo, or you only read these books and not those, and then it might be, it might be sincere, but that kind of restriction is not truth seeking. It's not conducive to truth seeking. So I spent some time in a situation like that, so I know what that looks like. Right. The words are to be admitted, Vatsyayana says, from the sutra, have to be supplied. Wanting to acquire knowledge and wisdom from the other, one can make known one's desires to know the truth without advancing a position of value. You don't have to go to a guru and say, I believe in this. No, you can just go and say, I don't know what I believe. I don't believe, I'm coming to you. You don't have to have a counter thesis, is what they're saying here. Even though that's how Nyaya operates, because it's clearing the ground of opposing views. At the end, it says, oh, by the way, you don't need to have an opposing point of view. You don't need to already have a belief to seek knowledge. You can just go with an open heart. Okay. So one can make known one's desire to know the truth without advancing a position of one's own in order to correct and certify one's view. Well, you probably have some view, so you're open to correcting it or to confirming it, as well as opponents' philosophies that are mutually contradicting. And then you also, want to learn about, well, why are these other views not correct? What's wrong with why doesn't this tradition accept momentariness? Why doesn't it accept materialism? So this is all part of the quest for truth. You have to, if you end up believing something, you should end up believing it and why not other things. You should have a clear idea of why you hold this to be true based on rational thinking, which Nyaya is offering. Why do we hold that there is an Atman and not other alternatives? Well, that's what Nyaya has tried to offer us. All right. And we end up where that's it. That's it. Nothing else there. Okay, so we're clear about what Nyaya is doing, my friends. It is quite happy. If you're happy reading the Upanishad, remember, you can't do yoga, Patanjali yoga, unless you believe there's an Atma. Again, Atta Yoga Anushasanam. Yoga's chitta vritti nirodha. This is what yoga is. And what do you get from it, Tada? Drashtu sarupe vastanam. You get an experience of the seer abiding in its own nature. What does that mean? It means you believe there's a seer. What you wouldn't do yoga unless you were already conditioned to whether you think of it that way or not. If you're doing yoga, that means you're accepting there's a seer. Why? On what grounds have you accepted that? You either heard about it or read about it. And Nyaya is going to say, fine, we'll give you another way of knowing it through logical reasoning and the elimination of alternative views. But don't think you can sit and do yoga on your mat without you've attained knowledge of the self from a source of knowledge. You can't say it's yoga because you haven't got there yet. You haven't gotten a Sarupe Vastanam experience yet. So you can't say you know about it because you're doing yoga, because you're doing yoga, but you haven't gone to the ground, you haven't got near Bija yet. So in the meantime, how do you know it's there? Well, most of us, it's words, the third source of knowledge. And Nyaya is just offering us another way, that's all. Not either or. Nyaya is offering us tools that bolster. The Upanishads are not philosophical at all. They're poetic and metaphoric. That works fine for lots of people. But if you're a rationalist, you want a little bit of intellectual structure. Not just, oh, my son, the Upanishads, oh, my son, it's beautiful. Oh, my son, bring me a glass of water, my son. Yes, Father, here it is. Okay, my son, now bring some salt, my son. Okay, Father, here's the salt. Okay, my son, now put the salt in this corner of the water. Okay, my Father, I've done that. Okay, son, come back tomorrow. Okay, Father, here I am. Okay, now, son, drink the water from this side of the cup. What is it? Oh, it's salty, Father. Drink from the other side of the cup. Oh, it's salty, Father. Salty, Father. Well, just see, son, you put salt in one corner, but it pervaded the whole water, such that now the whole thing is salty. In the same way, my son, although consciousness is situated in one part of the body, it pervades the whole body. That's the Upanishads. Bring me a fruit, my son. Oh, here it is, Father. Take one seed, my son. Okay. Well, you see this great banyan tree over there, my son? Yes, Father. That great banyan tree comes from this seed, my son. Oh, okay, Father. Just see, from this Atman, this whole universe, just as that from the seed comes a great banyan tree, so from the Atman comes that's the Upanishads. Take the rivers, my son. Yes, oh, okay. Do you see this one flows this way? This one is the Ganga, and that one is the Yamuna, and let's add and that's the Hudson, and that's the Thames. So they look like they're different rivers, my son, but when they get to the ocean, where are they, my son? Where is the Thames? Where is the Ganga? Oh, they all merge into that. Well, that's the Upanishads. When Nyaya goes, oh, that's nice. If you're a poet, okay, fine. Well, what if you're a rationalist? You say, all right, enough of this father-son business. Can you give us a little intellectual structure to this, please? Enough of rivers and salt and banyan trees, and they provide intellectual tools. Okay, enough. All right, that's it, my friends, until the next workshop. So I don't know what we're going to do. I'll sit and think about it. Maybe we'll do Mimamsa, and Mary will be happy. We'll make Mary happy. And then she'll say, I told you so. Mary says, I told you so. But Bhagavatam is very inviting too. Okay, my friends, that's it. Okay, what do you think? The Nyaya? All right, instead of questions, how about you give me some comments? Come on. I'm always answering questions. Give me some, I'd love to hear what, Rhonda, hold your question. I'd love to hear, and Rhonda can start if she wants to, and if she can hold a question. What has Nyaya provided you, right? It looks like some of you have done all 6 sessions. What you get out of this from a yogic point of view? Rhonda, I know that's not what you, if you want to answer that question, or if you have a different question, just hold it. Anybody want to volunteer? Just share how do you see Nyaya? We've explained how Nyaya sees itself. How have you found Nyaya to be helpful or not in your yogic journey? Anybody want to comment? Rhonda, did you want to comment or did you have a question? Let's do comments right now.
Yeah, I could do a comment.
Yeah.
It was a comment in the first place too, but it plays into this. I just wanted to say that, I took your course that you taught on Bhagavatam, and I have your book, and it's wonderful. And I'd love for you to teach on that again. And I just want to say, and I think everyone gets this too, that when you teach a subject, you bring so many other things into it that we're learning so many different things. So like a lot of us, it's like, whatever you want to teach, we're happy to hear you because you teach so many aspects, just like you have with this course. And then so I'm here for whatever you want to teach, but definitely bhakti is my choice.
Thank you, Rhonda. What do you have? Thank you so much. That's so sweet and so kind. So what's Nyaya contributed then from that package?
I think, well, I love the Yoga Sutras. It's been a passion of mine, and it's the study of it has led me to here. And I just love seeing all the different aspects that it brings to light on the Yoga Sutras and the whole concept. And I'm excited to study it more and to be open to it more. And, there's just a lot in there. So it helps my personal practice as well as my mental journey. And I'm just going to keep it short there.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Rhonda. So we got Steve. Steve's up there. Steve, Nyaya, how's Nyaya contributed to your yogic journey? To your
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah,
I thought that Nyaya Sutras would be quite dry, but it's you really. You've flowed it back into the Gita and the Sutras, and you're kind of tying things together, and I'm finding lots of areas that agree with each other, which you can see. Yeah.
Okay.
And it's just so unbelievably helpful, but that's coming from you, not Nyaya, I'm afraid.
That's very kind, Steve. Well, thank you so much. I see that. Jennifer, Nyaya, would you become a Nyayika? Would you just sort of say,
yes.
Okay, you would? All right.
Yes. And thank you for the terminology. I'm aware that I'm a rationalist thanks to this course. And one of the last things you said, that to be a yogi, you believe there's a seer. I'll call it's like in a nutshell, because the Patanjali Yoga Sutras have been unacceptable to me for a long time. The more svadhyaya I have done, and the growth of my shraddha, because to have faith is trust. And I do a lot of chanting. I've just been here in New Mexico, and Leslie Freiberg says hi.
Oh,
because we've been.
Is she still?
She says you gave her name, her Sanskrit name.
Vachaki.
Yes, exactly. Yes, she says hello.
Something like that. Yeah.
I've been with her for 5 days, and others, about 16 of us chanting with Sonia Nelson, and so it's Vedic chant, and I do this regularly. And the theme was Shraddha, and for that reason, there was something missing. There is something missing still in the Yoga Sutras, and this and other teachings like the Bhagavatam have helped me not locate, but to find what I've been wanting to embrace. Right. It's unfinished, but I'm moving in that direction. And you said something else meaningful for me was you have not experienced the Atman directly, where I think I'm adding that word directly. But I thought, wow, neither have I. And I've been waiting for it to happen or to be somewhere where it would, like a saint from in Europe, like Santa Clara or somebody who would just, it would be there, and it hasn't come yet. And I've been told to patience or it's already there.
Sure.
It's latent or dormant, or it pre-exists. So
yeah, that absolutely. Okay, thank you so much, and do greet Leslie. I'm so happy she's stuck with it. She's somehow or other she made that connection and she's gone with it. So that's fantastic.
In our group, she's a Sanskritist, and she's a fabulous chanter, and she's so devoted. And I'm glad you remember the name you gave her.
Yes, I did indeed. She did start studying Sanskrit. She didn't finish, but she definitely has a beautiful pronunciation and a beautiful relationship with the words somehow or other. She must have been. I think she might. I imagine her to have been one of the Brahmin families reciting Vedic hymns around the ancient Vedic fire. You can tell her I said that. Thanks.
All right, I will. Yes.
Yeah, Ned.
Thank you, Edwin, for these lessons and everything you do. This Nyaya course has gotten me thinking about, well, I guess, the counter theses and the fascination I have with materialism as a Westerner. And particularly, I wasn't entirely won over and convinced last week with the arguments, the line of reasoning around non-simultaneity. And I find myself just still pondering, but still open-mindedly counter theses around how sense perception at the level of neurons can be done asynchronously from one neuron to another and assembled together into complex thought. I'm open to that being a mechanism that's real. And
let's just. Would you remember what Nyaya's what do you remember, Ned? What Nyaya has a problem with in the way they would put it? Okay, you're using language neurons. They would say the eye is contacting the sense object on visually, and the ear orally. Okay, the five senses have their own domain, right? They're restricted to that one domain. Now, do you remember what their argument is?
It is that I can't recreate the argument perfectly, but my remembrance is that there can't be a place where that all comes together in one place, because they're all individual.
Exactly. So there has to be an entity who, if the fact that we can see, hear, and etc., let's just go with two things simultaneously, it can't be any one of those, because any one of those is restricted to its own. So if you say I is the conscious entity and is visually conscious, if you want to say that, and then you want to say ear is the oral entity and it is orally conscious, then you could never have one of their arguments, an experience of both at the same time, which suggests to Nyaya an entity distinct from that. Now, plug in what your doubt is neurologically. So you're saying, let's just put neurons, visual neurons, instead of the way they frame it, and then oral neurons, instead of the language they've used. They would still say, okay, you've just changed the language to neurological language, but what is the neuron, if you want to go down that route, that is able to experience both clusters, which should be autonomous locuses of experience? Where is the locus of the combined? If that's the question, Ned. So have a think about that.
That's what I've been thinking about. And my first, I don't know how to describe samskara, maybe. My samskara about this is mentally is that I'm first of all comfortable with the non-simultaneity of perceiving sight and hearing. I'm okay with eyes perceiving, ears perceiving, not even in the same moment giving that information into other neurons that are processing things like motor skills or reacting.
But then you would be accepting a model where there isn't simultaneity, that there it may be the periods of time between one experience and the other would be so minuscule that it would appear to be simultaneous, right? So if they're completely separate, if they're separate processes, then when one is being experienced, how could the other also be being experienced? Oh, I guess we're back to the same point. You'd have to
Well,
find.
I think about
it.
a circuit. In a circuit,
Yep.
on a chip, on a board, we have capacitors that can be charged and sustain an energy from
Right.
one moment to the next. And so in our brain, I imagine we have the same capacitance that can be charged and sustained with the perception of sight and the perception of hearing. And so these processes can be simultaneously charged up and feeding information to other circuits. It doesn't have to be localized either.
Well, hang on. Let's just think for a moment, and I'm out of my sphere of expertise. If you have a circuit, and we'll call it oral, and you have a circuit. First of all, if we could accept, I don't know whether you accept or not, but let's, for argument's sake, accept that the simultaneous experience, whatever that is, whether it's Atman or neurons, let's just start off with a shared premise. Remember supposition? Nyaya would say, let's start off with a supposition, okay? And then we'll argue from there. So let's start with a supposition, right? I'm trying to use Nyaya categories here, just to help us, see how rigorous they are, actually. Let's start with the supposition that there is simultaneity of experience of two or more sensory modalities. Let's accept that. If we want to debate it later, we can do that. But for now, we start with the supposition. There is simultaneity of experience by which we mean you can hear something, see it, touch it simultaneously. Right, now here's your thesis and counter thesis. Our thesis, says Nyaya, is there has to be a combiner because the circuits, if you want to use the language of circuitry, this circuitry is different from that circuitry. Okay, we say something distinct from the circuitries have to combine them. Now, if you don't take that view, the counter thesis is, how does this circuitry and that circuitry merge into each other, such that there's now a third type of circuitry or a merged circuitry where both of them are equally somehow merged together. Now, is that what neurology is saying?
I am imagining that simultaneously the senses, these two sense organs, are processing information independently, and there are other circuits that are taking information which can be interpolated by those circuits. So they don't have to, they could go out and sample the oral canal nerve one moment and then sample the optic nerve.
Yeah, but
and
wait.
Interpolate.
Yeah, but Ned, if you're saying they're doing this at one moment and that at another moment, then you're not accepting our supposition, which is that it's simultaneous. Now, accepting that, so you've got the two circuits, and you're saying now there's a third circuit that does what? That combines them? That's if you're saying the third circuit that's combining them, you're kind of doing what Nyaya wants to do, which is there must be an entity, a combiner. So you're heading in Nyaya's direction by positing a third entity, which does the work of combination. So you're somewhat overlapping with the Nyaya position there.
My position, my imagination is constructed that this third neuronal circuit is sampling and interpolating so that it doesn't have to know what's happening in this instant in the optic nerve while it's sampling the oral nerve and vice versa. But it can know moment to moment
simultaneous,
slightly in between.
How
Yeah,
does
so
it-
the simultaneity is the occurrence of the synthesis of understanding the pattern of each so that it can respond.
So then you have a neuron that's combining two different patterns into one mega pattern or one fused pattern. You still have a
Yes.
third entity doing the combining. It seems to me from what I'm hearing you say, you have a third entity doing the combination. That's kind of what Nyaya is saying. Listen, Ned, let's have a little think about it. See if you can do a little
Yeah,
research. See if you can do a little
I think I
research.
didn't accept the premise of simultaneity.
Okay, so have a little, see if you can dig around and see what would neurologists, how do they account for simultaneity of multiple sensory experiences? Do they have an explanation? And then we'll continue the conversation. But thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much. That was very interesting. Jose. You have to unmute, Jose.
Sorry. Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
I really loved the course on Nyaya, my first exposure, but it's because my basic. You have to know where I come from. I'm a big skeptic. I don't believe in enlightenment. I don't believe it's possible to experience Atman or Brahman, but I do love Hinduism because it's, as far as I can tell, it's based on argumentation, and not on faith. Like Christianity or Islam. So what I love about the Nyaya, especially as you teach it, is that the questions is raised.
Yeah.
I'm more interested in the questions than the answers.
Okay.
And so the questions that your course raise, makes me think, and that's kind of, what I kind of get my jollies out of. And so the questions that raised for me is, I want to know, what is it to know? I want to understand the 6 pramanas. I wanted to know, what's the criterion for truth? How does knowing reach the truth? How do I overcome my skepticism? What is it to know? And so the course in Nyaya helps me to think about these. Again, I can't get to the answers necessarily, but expands my horizons enough that I can at least think about it. And it's interesting to think about it, especially now that you've added the perspectives and the things you taught us about Nyaya. So for me, it's more the intellectual expansion and satisfaction that I get out of it.
Excellent. Jose, thank you so much. My friends, I'm going to wrap this up. And if you are interested in Nyaya, the author, Matthew Dusty, has just put out an entire translation of the entire Nyaya Sutras with the entirety of Vatsyayana, one of the commentators that we've sort of dipped into throughout this little book. This is a selections. He's done the whole thing. I haven't seen it yet. I've been on sabbatical. There's a copy sitting in my office. I'm going to be teaching Intro to Hindu Philosophy next semester, and I'm going to look at it to see if we can use it. But anyway, if you're interested, you can. That's available now. It's Amazon, same author, Matthew Dusty, and I guess it would be called something like the Nyaya. Make sure you get the full, not the selections is what we've used in this course, but if you're interested in that, just came out, and I'm just informing you if you want to sort of go a little bit deeper. So let's bid each other farewell. And if you want to, if you want to make some noise about Bhagavatam next year, or something on the other 2 schools we haven't covered, those of you here or those of you that are going to download this video later, send me an email with your choice and show some enthusiasm, so that will make me enthusiastic about continuing the Svadhyayas. Twice a year seems, if it's too much, then people don't, something that's too easily available psychologically tends to seem less attractive. But once I start Bhagavatam, that's going to be it. I'll never do anything else. So if you want to, last couple of last year, one more year doing these intellectual traditions, I might be open to it. But okay, let me know. All right. So good day, good night. I'm just going to quickly, you can all log off. I'm just going to quickly see if there's anything in the chats I need to know about. And have a great day or evening or whatever, my friends.
Thank you, Edwin G.
Take care. How do I go?
Thank you.
Allora,
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Wonderful.
yeah.
Thank you, Edwin.
Take care. Yeah. Aspetta, devo chiudere.